Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1280 of the War News stream. And today we got some very big news that Russia's declared emergency measures over mass bankruptcies across Russia. Also, an attack drone crashed on Estonian territory this time, and also the Russian gas crisis is expanding, this time to the Kurill Islands near Japan. We have big news, and it's good to see you all once again.
And, of course, we're going to be covering the past 48 hours of news from around the world, as we have been able to hear significant developments from the state of Ukraine, as we have been able to hear that the Russian Federation 7 brigades near to the area of the city of Pokrovsk are still under an effective encirclement at the moment, although Ukrainian armed forces have not been able to complete a complete encirclement within the past 48 hours. However, Ukrainian forces just several dozen miles south, near to the smaller town of the city of Zaporizhzhia, have been able to conduct a counteroffensive that is currently encircling 2 Russian battalion tactical groups around that area, once again showing that Ukrainian armed forces are largely appearing at this moment to have the offensive abilities behind them, even at this moment of the war. We have also been able to hear at the exact same time that the Russian Federation is undergoing significant economic collapse, as we have been able to hear that the Russian Federation, as an emergency economic measure today, has had to suspend all bankruptcy moratorium, or to issue a moratorium on agricultural bankruptcies inside the Russian Federation. This is coming as Russian farmers are declaring bankruptcy at a near apocalyptic scale, most likely appearing that within the next few months, the entire Russian agriculture industry may collapse if bankruptcies continue forward. For this reason, the Russians have implemented an emergency measure that banks cannot attempt to collect and force a farmer into bankruptcy to try and keep these Russian farmers operational, considering that the harvest season is coming around just in a couple of months, and the harvest season is an incredibly important time to ensure that the crops are harvested, processed, and food security remains somewhat stable, at least within the Russian Federation. But it does appear that a near-apocalyptic scenario is already evolving inside of the domestic agricultural sphere. Not only that, but fuel shortages are beginning to grip the Russian Federation to even even larger degrees, as the fuel shortage in the occupied regions is now extended to all fuel sources, and we have also been able to hear that the Novosibirsk refinery has taken significant damage after a fire was able to burn at the facility for nearly 4 to 5 days. Not only that, we have been able to hear that at this point, now that the Russian Federation has seen that the smoke is literally cleared from all of the oil refinery attacks, nearly 17 to 18% of all Russian oil refining abilities inside the country are currently knocked out at this moment, and it does appear that there may be no time in the future where that number ever drops below 17%, as Ukrainian attacks against Russian oil refineries continue at a massive pace. Not only that, we have been able to hear that the Kurill Islands, a small island chain seen just outside of the island of Hokkaido, which makes up the northern part of the mainland of Japan, has now been stated to be out of fuel as well. We are expecting that that will extend throughout the rest of the Eastern Russian Federation within these next few weeks. On top of that, we have also been able to hear that the People's Republic of China is continuing their purge, apparently, Songhua Di, to the point that they have to get rid of the entirety of the PLA. We have also been able to hear that the Republic of India is apparently going to be cutting 20% of their Russian oil imports, but they're not going to be cutting them entirely, meaning that the United States tariffs and sanctions against the Republic of India are soon to be coming around. Outside of that, a shocking upset has started to develop between the Islamic Republic of Iran and the Russian Federation, as the Islamic Republic of Iran is now calling the Russian Federation a scam, and saying that their arms trades with the Russian Federation are not producing anything beneficial for the Islamic Republic of Iran, and that this may end up being a pretty transactional or one-sided relationship worth cutting off between the two countries. Meanwhile, the State of Israel has been conducting raids inside the West Bank, and the Egyptian army is continuing to fortify their position near to the area of the southern end of the Gaza Strip to stop any Gazans from being able to flee outside the Gaza Strip and into the Sinai Peninsula inside of Egypt. Outside of that, Ukrainian armed forces are still conducting their defensives across most of the line and have been able to inflict significant casualties onto the Russian Federation over the past 24 hours. On top of that all, we have been able to hear that Belgium will be sending some additional F-16s to the state of Ukraine. A unidentified drone exploded just to the west of Tartu, inside of Estonia, and we've also been able to hear of some developments inside of South America, as Venezuela has now deployed 15,000 troops to the coast and their borders, and we've also been able to hear that the United States of America is now considering sending a guided missile cruiser, as well as another fast attack submarine into the region, and we've also been able to get some other developments from the United States in terms of foreign policy today as well. We have a lot of news, quite a significant amount, and I do also want to say that today's news is juicy, not as huge as it has been, but still incredibly large developments in terms of the big picture or the long-term picture of what's going to be happening in terms of foreign policy or what's going to be happening to the Russian Federation and other areas around the world. But nevertheless, we have a lot of news to cover, and we're going to be making sure to get y'all into each and every little piece and detail of that news as much as we can tonight. And so moving us on into the most major piece of news that we have been able to hear tonight, we have been able to hear that the Russian Federation is suffering a near complete economic collapse at this moment, at least in terms of the agricultural industry. I do want to make it quite clear, however, that most, if not every single Russian economic sector is already suffering from great ailments and strains due to the tough financial situation inside of the Russian Federation, but the worst that we have been able to see so far is the agricultural sector inside the Russian Federation. Today, the Russian Federation made a special decree issuing a moratorium on the bankruptcies in the agricultural sector and an attempt to stem the flow of farm collapses. You can actually see all of the details here that was stated about the situation going on inside the Russian Federation, and also the Russian state media's reporting on the declaration of the moratorium. This is the original text in Russian from the article that was published by Russian media today about the situation, but to summarize, the situation inside the Russian Federation is apocalyptic at this moment inside the agricultural sector. Many of y'all will know that already in the agricultural machinery sector, there appeared to have been some significant problems earlier this year, as Rostelmash, the largest manufacturer of agricultural products or implements inside the Russian Federation, including tractors, harvesters, and any other kind of farm machinery, had to pretty much cut off their entire manufacturing and are only focusing on repairs. That was just after they had relegated their manufacturing from a 5-day work week to a 4-day work week. like. It now appears that Rostelmash, it was only the beginning of the end for the Russian agricultural sector, as the fact that the Russian Federation is issuing a moratorium on bankruptcies right now in the agricultural sector is giving us a key indicator that something is going on very badly inside of Russia that the Russian media nor the Russian government is speaking about, but this moratorium is something incredibly important to note. Moratoriums on bankruptcies are generally conducted to stop a bank or a financial institution from going through and just pretty much declaring swaths of bankruptcies in a specific sector, which would lead to its imminent collapse. The fact that this is having to happen means that a large amount of Russian farmers or Russian farm companies are about to go into receivership or bankruptcy, meaning that the Russian banks would be going through and liquidating these companies for whatever assets or land that they have, trying to sell it so that way they could make even as much as possible on the loans that these Russian farmers are defaulting on.
Well, actually, Enforcer, it's worse than that, actually. A moratorium on bankruptcies typically means that companies are already going into bankruptcy, and in this specific instance, it's farms and agricultural industries going into bankruptcy. They're already in it. That's the problem. The moratorium simply prohibits the debt collectors from coming in, actually taking their debt and actually collecting on the debt. That's what the moratorium stops. So it is a moratorium on the bankruptcies themselves, but it's also a moratorium on the companies that are already in bankruptcy. So now all the people in Russia that were lending out money, they can't even collect on the debt at this point because the Russian government feels that if they do collect on the debt, there's going to be so many farms literally collapsing and completely going out and bust that they have to stop it.
And this is actually a major situation. To explain this really quickly, this is a similar situation that was seen in the United States of America a long time ago in an era far, far away, about roughly 100 years ago, and that would have been the start of the Great Depression in 1929. The Great Depression was the only time in U.S. history where there was any sort of a famine inside the United States of America on a nationwide scale. Interestingly enough, the United States of America is one of the only countries in the world, save for a handful of others, including Canada, that has only had a famine, not due to a lack of food, but due to a lack of people being able to afford food products. That occurred during the Great Depression. Basically, to explain to all of y'all what was happening when the Great Depression occurred, a large amount of farmers in the United States of America had gotten a great deal of loans from the U.S. government in the First World War to be able to expand their farm production capabilities and also to be able to expand their industrialization of their farms to be able to produce a higher yield of crops. These loans had a pretty significant interest rate on them, and considering that after the war there was not as large a demand for agricultural products such as foods, these farmers were never able to turn a large enough profit to be able to pay off their loans. This resulted in around the time just before the Great Depression, which would be right now 100 years ago, in about the early 1920s, a decent amount of these farmers started to default on their loans and their farms were going under. Then, once the Great Depression started, a lot of banks started going around and demanding collection on the remainder of the loans that a lot of these farmers had not paid yet outright, which started to create an even worse situation where farmers were absolutely at the brink. They had to come up with the money or their farms were going to go into receivership and completely collapse. So then a lot of these farmers started to flood the market with all of their crops that they had available to try and make as much money as possible, which caused the price of the crops to crash through the floor. They were worth practically nothing, and then that resulted in none of these farmers making money. All of them went into bankruptcy anyways, and then right afterwards, the price, right after plummeting pretty much into the floor, started to skyrocket through the ceiling because the availability of crops, due to the complete lack of most farmers that were producing crops in the country no longer being around, started to take place. This was what led to the FDR administration at the time to implement a great deal of agricultural regulations and such things afterwards that still exist to this day. Meaning, in the larger sense, the American agricultural industry still is heavily regulated in the modern day because of what happened during the Great Depression. The Russian Federation's agricultural economic structure was already insanely regulated because it is a half-breed or a crossbreed attempt to try and create a capitalistic farming system, but also trying to break out of the yoke of the collectivist farming system that once existed inside of the Soviet Union. And considering that that is the case, and considering that a lot of these farmers have their entire livelihood pretty much entirely subsidized by the Russian Federation, so that way they can keep their farms running, almost in like a semi sort of a collective farming system, but still somewhat semi-private as well. This means that these farms are not even able to survive in that kind of a heavily coddled system. They are going into a state of complete collapse right now. And this also means that at this moment, not only are the Russian farmers looking at the situation of rising fuel costs and shortages, stopping them from conducting any of their work, they're not even able to financially afford keeping their farms running right now, which means that here in the near future, this is what is most likely going to happen. A lot of these farmers are going to attempt to rush the pretty much the supply of crops by flooding the market to try and sell as much as they can to try and keep themselves afloat somehow. This is going to crash the price of food inside the Russian Federation to some degree, but there is actually a price floor and a price ceiling that is instituted by the Russian government that means that while the markets will be flooded with food, they can only go so low in their cost. They can only go so high as well, meaning that basically due to the Russian government's regulations, there'll be lots of crops out there. They'll just rot on the shelves because people won't be able to buy enough of them. And of course, this stuff isn't shelf stable forever. And then afterwards, all of these farmers are still going to go broke anyways. The moratoriums are making sure that the banks don't go through and just start liquidating everything. But these farmers are still not going to have enough money to even run their farms in the first place. They'll exist on paper, but they're not going to be operational. Then in turn,
But you know what's going to be worse than that, though. The food's going to be rotting, the farmers going to be going bust and actually collapsing the entire farm system in Russia. But also, this moratorium, while it may look like a good measure to help the Russian farmers not go bankrupt, it's actually going to probably cause more harm than it's actually doing good here, because the lenders are the Russian banks. That's who's the lenders, and the Russian banks are already hurting because if as everybody's already aware, banks make money by lending out money basically, and they get interest off of that, and then they use that to fund the bank, and it keeps the bank operating. So the key interest rate in Russia right now is through the roof. Like, it's extremely high right now, and there's hardly anybody borrowing money from the Russian banks. So that's already causing trouble at the bank. Now the bank, because of the moratorium, they can't collect on the debts that the farmers had. So now the Russian banks won't be collecting money. They can't lend money. It sounds to me like the banks are about to be in some serious trouble very soon.
Yeah, the banks are going to be in absolutely serious trouble because they are not able to collect on any of the loans that any of these farmers took out to keep their farms operational in the first place. So now they've just taken a complete loss. They're not even able to recuperate any of the money that they gave these farmers as a loan. So this is an apocalyptic situation no matter which way the Russian government looks at it. At this point, a lot of these farmers are basically already screwed, whether or not they go into bankruptcy or not. And now the banks are also screwed because they're not allowing the banks to try and liquidate any of these assets. Although I also have to say that because of the sanctions, there really is no way for them to liquidate these assets, because what other farmers buying these farm implements or the land? No one has the money to be able to do that. And on top of that, pretty much due to the sanctions, nobody's going to be buying Russian farm implements from overseas. They don't even have a way to export it. So basically, it's screwed every single way around. The agricultural sector is literally imploding right before our very eyes at this moment right now. And this will most likely continue on for a couple of more months. And I have a feeling that we'll most likely see this culminate during the harvest season, which will be coming later on in the fall. Usually in Russia, this is sometime around late September through October. It's not that late in the year because the rasputitsa and also the frost will start to happen, so they have to harvest a little bit earlier than normal for most other areas of the world. So we will most likely see that this will come to a head not that much longer from now, about a month or a month and a half from now. And
also, can you imagine, and not just the farming industry, but the farming industry is what's catching the headlines right now, but also we've been hearing about all the other industries inside of Russia having severe economic troubles. Like, for example, some of the major truck manufacturers and also agricultural equipment manufacturers, they've been having such bad issues. They're having to cut the work week down from like 5 to 6 days down to 4 days because they can't hardly afford to pay their workers at all. So it's such a widespread, wide-ranging economic crisis in Russia right now that I'm sure that this is not the only industry that is basically having a unofficial or informal moratorium put on it. I would imagine these other companies out there, like these major Russian truck companies, probably are not making their debt payments on time. That would be my guess, because otherwise, why would they be cutting down their work week like that and also making their debt payments at the same time? I would imagine they're probably working out some deals in the background to get a bit of a break from the bank, I would assume, or something of that nature, because surely they're not making their payments.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely horrendous at this point. Like, for people who have been saying for a long time, "Haha, look, Russia has not been hit by Western sanctions. Russia's strong." They're about to learn here really soon that Russia is not that strong, because at this point, every single sector in the Russian Federation, in terms of industry, is either failing or is on the verge of failing. Even outside of that, we have been able to hear of even further crippling situations inside of the Russian Federation at the moment. We were able to hear that apparently Dugin, on top of all the economic turmoil, Dugin is apparently causing significant problems in the Russian government. You know, the guy who looks like the modern Rasputin. But before we get into what he's causing in the Russian government, let's talk really quickly about what y'all are thinking about this moratorium on the agricultural bankruptcies. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that? And what are you thinking about that as well?
All right. So focusing solely on the farm bankruptcy issue here with the temporary pause on the bankruptcies, what are your thoughts on that? And 61% said Russia is truly on its last moments, and this is indicative of a major economic problem, while 21% said it seems ominous but not really critical, and 12% said it's a totally normal economic measure. And I can assure you, this is not normal. Putting a moratorium on bankruptcies, that is a very, very strong emergency measure. If that's considered normal, then we're living in an upside down world. So it's indicative of a much larger problem. And once again, remember, the Russians cooked the books. Like, there's no question about that. The Russians definitely cooked the books. So if they are announcing in the public that there's a moratorium on bankruptcies, there's probably a lot more going on in the background that we're not even aware of in the public that's probably much more dire than it seems, because they like to do propaganda like wild, like crazy. And since we're hearing about this one, that means it's so bad they couldn't even cover it up. So the farms must be having crazy difficulties. And I would say that Russia seems to be on its last moments, because you can't have so many industries going bankrupt like this and then say that the country can survive, because otherwise, how's Russia making money? They got to get taxes, they got to make money, the banks have to lend money. None of that's really happening right now, and it hasn't been happening for quite a long time. This isn't new, but it's definitely getting worse. But Enforcer, what say you?
It is an absolutely horrendous situation. I would have to be with the 61%. Russia is in its final moments. Well, two things are incredible. Actually, there are several things that are incredibly important in an economy. One is the availability of housing. Two is the availability of food. Three is the availability of any kind of usable water. And four is the ability to transport any and all of the materials needed to keep the other three running, which would be fuel. Russia is running out of fuel. Russia is running out of housing. Russia is running out generally of the money to keep their civil facilities functional. So that means that the supply of water might also be having some issues here in the near future, especially due to a lack of maintenance. And on top of all that, they're running out of fuel to be able to transport any of this stuff, to be able to even get it to market, to be able to sell it. Whether it be construction materials to build new housing, whether it be food, whether it be anything, they will not have the ability to even transport it, because the fuel shortages are also starting to cripple most parts of the extremities of Russia and will most likely reach the central part of Western Russia here in the near future. This is Russia in its last hours economically. They are either going to end up completely collapsing and the government will cease to exist as a result of that, or the economy is going to completely collapse and Russia is going to self-isolate a lot like North Korea and pretty much end up becoming a mega North Korea. Those are really the only two options that they have at the moment, and I'll be entirely honest with y'all, I do not think that Putin has been able to purge the government enough and create such a stable enough situation, at least for his governance, to be able to turn it into a Juche-like system like North Korea that the Fat Man's operating off of. I don't think that he has that kind of stability, and if the economy collapses to this degree, I have a feeling that Putin is most likely going to be on his way out at that point immediately, in the words of the East German chancellor, who pretty much led to the collapse of the Berlin Wall, without further delay. But moving on from that,
also real quick, Enforcer, I want to make this point real quick, because some people are talking about the key interest rate inside of Russia being extremely high, and it is extremely high. It actually has lowered just a little bit. The Russians have tried to lower the interest rate. Right now, it's sitting at about 18% per annum right now, which is obviously still extremely high. Like 18%, that is wild. Just to give you an idea of how devastating that interest rate can be, for example, in Russia, if you try to buy an automobile that costs 30,000 US dollars, which that's a very expensive car for Russians, that's like wildly expensive. That's years and years and years years worth of salary. But let's just take that for example. A car that costs $30,000 in Russia in US dollars for a 60-month term, and the interest rate is 18%. The car costs $30,000, and you'll pay about $11,000 in interest, just in interest alone. That's like 1/3 of the value of the car, just in interest. That's how bad the interest rate is, and that goes for everything. That's buying a home in Russia, buying a car, buying anything that you have to finance. You're going to pay that rate, which is why nobody in Russia is borrowing money. They can't afford to borrow it.
Yeah, it's a literal apocalyptic situation that's going on in Russia right now, and it doesn't look like it's getting better. It's getting worse. So like not really the greatest thing. 18%. That's what I think in the West, man. I think it's called a shark loan.
Yeah, basically. Well, it used to be called a shark loan. These days, it might be called fair play, but it used to be called a shark loan.
Nowadays, I think that's just called capitalism, I think, is what the financial advisor said. But anyways, moving on from that, we were also able to hear that Dugin's causing a shitstorm in the government. So while there is an endless amount of chaos just happening naturally because of the economic situation, now apparently Dugin's creating issues in the government because of those stupid, weird, cryptic, esoteric statements that he's been making for weeks now. So let's go through it. I'm going to read this off exactly how it came out today from Visioner on Twitter, and we're going to talk about it, or at least what he's doing. In the Russian internet space, based on sources close to the Kremlin, as they themselves write, information is spreading that philosopher Alex Dugin's public activity is already causing tension within the government. According to the behind-the-scenes sources, several high-ranking Kremlin officials have openly spoken in private about the destructiveness of Dugin's ideas and statements, which have recently become increasingly radical. They said that Dugin has effectively become the public representative of that part of Russian society which demands war until final victory, which isn't even like a small element of society. That's literally what Putin subscribes to. However, it is already clear to everyone that we will have to negotiate with the West and try to take advantage of the current administration's desire to end the conflict in Ukraine. That's according to some sources in the Kremlin. In such a development of events, Dugin may begin to undermine trust in the authorities, at least according to some Kremlin insiders, according to what's being said. And of course, these are all anonymous tips, so take them for what you will. Sources do not rule out that the Russian authorities may soon begin demonstratively distancing themselves from Dugin and other similar radical figures who will no longer be relevant in the current political situation. In such a case, it will be important to show that this odious philosopher and ideologist of the 21st century, Russian chauvinism, does not represent the Kremlin's position, and that Dugin's statements are solely his personal affair, not sanctioned from above. Here's a couple of problems with these statements, though, from the quote-unquote Kremlin insiders. One, Dugin is the advisor of Putin. Two, Putin subscribes completely to his philosophy, because Putin has made it clear through the foreign minister Sergei Shoigu, aka the Horseface, that they are not willing to even negotiate with the Ukrainians because the Ukrainian state is illegitimate. The United States only wishes to disadvantage the Russians if they ever reach a peace deal with the United States, and so the war will keep going until absolute victory. This isn't just Dugin's philosophy, this is Putin's philosophy, inspired by Dugin. So Dugin is not that far off from what the Russian government is actually thinking, and also this guy looks like he's absolutely insane. I actually think I saw one of these guys rummaging through a dumpster in downtown Birmingham like just 2 days ago. But
this guy right here could take your soul, just by the way he looks like that right there. You can tell he goes through a lot of effort to try to make himself look like the modern Rasputin. Like he wants to look like that, because this is like a super intentional look. Like you just don't wake up looking like this in the morning unless you're like, oh, I want to wake up today and look like a real philosopher today. This guy right here probably calls himself the philosopher king.
Man, honestly, man, he's probably like a philosopher bro. I bet you if you went to his Twitter, it'd be like some like deep philosopher bro hours, and he'll say something like, "Are we born to shit, forced to wipe?" And it's like, oh, that's deep, some stupid stuff like that. But beyond that, this guy is pretty much the representative of Russia's beliefs at this moment. So I'm highly doubting that these people who don't like him in the Kremlin are going to get any traction. Putin loves the guy and eats up everything that he suggests. Moving on from that, we also were able to hear that apparently some people are saying, this is what some people are saying, although I think that there's a lot opposite being shown here, that apparently Russia's new elite wants the war to continue, at least according to the Telegraph. A new middle class has emerged in cities where the war has provided a sharp rise in wages and status for workers and military families. Contract soldiers receive higher wages, bonuses and benefits, and priority for their children when entering universities. Dang, bro, that's literally like the North Koreans. Because if you have a high up position inside of North Korea, You yourself, if you're not university educated yet, or your children, will get prioritized for a seat at Kim Il-sung University, which is the highest level university and really the only university in North Korea. So the Russians have apparently a similar sort of a metric that if you ever join their version of the Korean People's Army, the Russian Army, as a volunteer, you get prioritized for the Putin University, I guess, or Hustlers University, whichever one you prefer. Workers engaged in the production of military products earn several times more than before the war production and war industry. These people are not interested in returning to peacetime. Experts warn of a possible social catastrophe after the war. And while
no, the Russians just found about the military-industrial complex. They found that they can make money off of war. This is terrible right here. But honestly, though, like seriously speaking, the truth of the matter is, it's not just the elite in Russia that's going to have a problem if the war comes to a stop. It's going to be everybody in Russia, because like we've been like harping on for a long time, the entire economy in Russia relies on wartime production. So if you don't have that, and that's the main way that you're making money, which is proven by the fact the elite know they're making extra money from it, then your entire economy is going to come crashing down unless a miracle happens. So nobody can survive in Russia if the war comes to a stop. That's just the truth of it. And that's why Putin's incentivized to keep it going. It's not just the elite, it's literally every level of society.
Yeah, it's a really interesting, but at the same time, though, there's also this problem. If the war keeps going, every other economic sector but the war industry is going to collapse. That's become incredibly clear as of today. So right now, the Russians are met with an ultimatum. They can either end the war and collapse everything, or they can keep the war going, and at least for now, everyone who's involved in the war, either in the military or in the war industry, are still making some money. So will everyone collapse if the war ends, or will the small little people continue to succeed as the war continues? And it appears that the Russians are incredibly clear they'd rather go with the latter rather than the former, because at least with the latter, some people are still making some money, although everyone else is pretty much out of a job. So with that, we are on to our next bit of news inside of Moscow, as we have been able to hear just yesterday that the Russians are now going to be withdrawing from the European Convention for the Prevention of Torture. There's nothing that says the Russians are a civil people rather than removing themselves from a convention that stops them from torturing people. The decree was signed by Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin just the other day, this guy right here, which already looks generally like torture. But nevertheless, it does appear...
Oh my God. You know what they did? They had someone in the chair. They didn't let them out of the chair, and they said, "Look at it. Look at it." And this guy literally just leaned his head over and it like gleamed the light. And the guy said, "Get it out of my face. I can't look at it anymore."
Bro, that guy like whipped out the SpongeBob line. My eyes! My eyes!
Seriously though, man, he polished that with some like a mopping glue this morning or something.
Man, honestly, dude, like that, like they got out the shiner, like the head shiner, you know, like that thing with like the little Dremel attachment to it, like to shine his head that morning. But beyond that, they are now going to be torturing people on the books. Just to give you an idea of how civil the Russians really are. I gotta be honest with y'all, the Russians never make a good argument for anyone to ever say that they're a forward-thinking country that is advanced and we should learn from them, because now they're openly saying that they're going to be torturing people by removing themselves from this convention. Now that they haven't already been torturing people, now they're just making it official that we are going to be I don't know, hardcore or something. We're going to just start torturing people we don't like. So make sure, folks, that if you're an American, don't be stupid and go to Russia. The chances are high they'll arrest you, and now they'll also torture you, apparently, as well. And they publicly have an ability to say that because they're not a part of any sort of a goodwill declaration or convention of any kind that says that they don't torture people. So there you have it. A little bit of an interesting development. Outside of that, Russia is still dealing with about 17% of its refineries being knocked out at the moment, and that is continuing to cause a lot of issues. We were able to see that pretty much in the entirety of Melitopol, inside of the occupied regions of Ukraine, every gas station is out of gas.
Езжу по городу, проехал, вот 11-я заправка, смотрите, бензина нет.
You know what's dumb? You know what's so dumb about this? This guy is literally driving around the city. He said this is the 11th one that doesn't have gas. Meanwhile, he's literally emptying his entire tank to go look at every single gas station. It's like, this is top tier stupidity.
Bro, he's like, look, they're all out of gas as the car engine slowly whirs under them, burning the rest of
Yeah, really.
He's like, bro.
Только дизель, вот 12-я заправка. Только дизель и газ. Все, нету бензина вообще. Если вчера еще второй был, я даже заправился, я залил полный бак в акуре, еще 2 канистры взял.
Oh, this guy is prepared, though. He actually got some extra gas just to make sure he could keep the car running.
It seems like that would be outlawed too, because I thought they were issuing coupons to get the gas. Surely they don't let people take extra home.
Man, this guy bribed someone. Like, he bribed
Probably.
someone at the gas
И
station.
даже
probably.
видел вчера на одной заправке 5-й был. Не знаю, настоящий он или разбавленный, потому что есть, тут продают разбавленный. 5-го вообще нету, вообще нигде, уже недели 2.
Can't you run some of these cars
Хорошо,
like the
когда
smaller engines on vodka or something? Like, is that a myth or is that a real deal? Like, because vodka is almost like ethanol to an extent. So couldn't you run it on that?
I don't really know, actually. That's a good question. I wouldn't know off the top of my head, though.
They got plenty of vodka. Like, seemed like they could just convert some distilleries and start making some extra fuel.
Bruh, you're speaking blasphemy in Russia. Vodka going into a gas tank instead of your mouth? Ridiculous. Like, ridiculous.
Yeah, they probably would never do it just for that reason.
Man, honestly, bro, they'd be like, no, my secret vodka. Like, bro, you would not be able to get them to do that, man.
Дизель есть везде. Я не знаю, я не представляю даже, если не будет дизеля, что вообще будет. Вот эти все фуры, не знаю, доставки, ну это все встанет. Это и наша работа встанет, и полностью всех, весь город встанет. Поэтому я не знаю, на чем люди ездят, второго даже нету, а машин полный город. Вот все заправки пустые полностью, все.
Well, it appears that the gas shortage is continuing to worsen. Outside of that, we also were able to see that the area around Novosibirsk was singed and burned pretty much to completion. Look at that. That's what Gordon Ramsay would call burned right there. And you can actually see some fire retardant on the ground still around some of the tanks. Didn't really seem to stop a lot of the fire. So at least the upper 10th or 8th of the entire refinery has been burned to the ground. Outside of that, we also were able to hear that the Kurill Islands are now out of gas. I unfortunately did not have a video to put down on the map for that today. At least from what I could put down, we had a lot else to cover. But the Kurill Islands, which is this little island chain just outside of Japan, this is actually a little bit interesting, folks. This is Hokkaido, which is the northernmost mainland island of Japan. Right out here is the Kurill Islands. It's like a little island chain that extends off of the area of the Kamchatka Peninsula. It's somewhat similar to the Aleutian Island chain that actually extends off of the state of Alaska, down here near to the area of Cold Bay, or the Unimak Island. That is also a part of the Aleutian Island chain itself. So, interesting enough, these islands, which are somewhat smaller, are now also completely out of gas. Another extremity of the Russian Federation that is being cut off from greater fuel supplies so that way they can try and prioritize the main economic center and really military-industrial center of Western Russia. It does appear, though, the situation is worsening by the day, and it's not improving any at all. Meanwhile, we also were able to hear that some Russians, they had a little bit of an issue today, because this is what happened. Let me read to all of you and tell you what happened today. But it became known, and this is according to the Russians, by the way, so I will read this the best way I can. Today it became known that a Nazi drone of military formation immediately struck the house of last legitimate president of Ukraine, Viktor Yanukovych. Today, Zelensky's regime decided to destroy Yanukovych, who was supposed to take power in the country after the liberation and demilitarization of Ukraine. This was revenge for the fact that Yanukovych did not follow the lead of the Ukrainians, who jumped on the Maidan and sent Moskalok to the head. I don't know what that means. The attack was targeted at the location of the legitimate president of Ukraine, so Zelensky's regime could continue to live. We must destroy the regime in Ukraine. Womp womp womp. Wah. Matthew, do we have that soundboard where we could put the little womp 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 thing up here, like really quickly? Could we get that?
Go for it again. Go for it.
Man, I guess you could say a little womp womp womp. There we go. That's an appropriate sound effect for this. But
oh man,
the Ukrainians blew up Yanukovych's house today. Oh, wah. Isn't this a shame, everyone? They blew it up with a drone. So, you know, they had nothing lost really there. Everyone knows that Yanukovych was a traitor to the state of Ukraine and pretty much tried to sell him out to the Russians. And also, Yanukovych is the puppet president that Russia would install in Ukraine post-war if they end up winning. So, nothing really sad there. Yanukovych is still alive, however. Apparently he's not dead. But beyond that, though, not really that big of a deal. Nevertheless, a lot of people are talking about the fact that Russia might not be able to end the war right now because it's the only thing making them money. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that? And what are you thinking about it as well?
And I gotta say, that soundboard is so cheap sounding, but I love it so much. Like, I really love that soundboard. I love that soundboard, I'm telling you. But we won't use it too much, so we don't want to abuse it. But jumping into our poll here, it says analysts say that Russia's elite do not want the war to end because it makes big money for those Russians. And what are your thoughts? 51% said that's true. The elite want more money, while 29% said that's false because the entire Russian economy would collapse. It's not about greed, it's about the economy literally collapsing. And 15% said I don't buy the entire story. And I would say I buy the story, but it's a little bit more nuanced than simply saying the elite want to make more money. It's literally an issue with the entire economy because Putin knows that. That's why he can't end the war, and that's why he's basically dragging the USA along for a big roller coaster ride because he knows he can't end it. So I'm going to be with the 29%. I think it's false. The entire Russian economy would collapse if the war came to a sudden end, which is why they can't do it. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to agree with the 52%. They're not even really elites. It's just that some folks are wanting some more money, and now an interest group has been formed out of these people that have to keep the war going to make money. But the problem is, folks, is that the Russians are in something of a paradox right now. Either decision that they make, whether to end the war or to keep it going, the economy is going to collapse, and everyone's going to be out of money. The problem is that if they end the war now, the economy collapses, and even this interest group of people who are making money off of it, they also go to the wayside as well. If they keep the war going, the economy is still going to collapse. We already see that that's happening right now. But these people that are in this interest group for the meantime will be able to keep making some money for now. So at least some people in Russia will continue to be an economic motivator, an economic machine in a sense. And that's really the sort of options that Russia has. Both of them are incredibly grim, but one of them has a slight silver lining to them. And really quickly to explain this, there is no truth, I'll just be entirely honest to y'all, to the idea that people say war makes money. War does not make money. Crazily enough, it's a shocker, right?
Mhm.
Because it's interesting to note that in every single war that has ever been fought, there is someone who loses a great deal of money fighting a war. Because if everyone made money off of a war would just keep going forever. The fact of the matter is that wars don't make money. Wars lose countries money. Hence, for example, look at every country in Europe at the end of World War II. Britain and France were literally on the verge of bankruptcy because of how much World War II cost. Germany, Nazi Germany, had bankrupted itself right before the war had ended, or they pretty much got steamrolled by everyone. The Soviet Union was technically, if you could measure them economically, almost bankrupt. The only country that came out of it somewhat good was the United States, because we were the ones who pretty much were not only supplying our armed forces ourselves, which cost a lot of money, but we also were able to cover those costs by selling our weapons in lend-leases that we were able to make money off of after the war to everyone else around the world. Pretty much meaning that we were the only ones to actually make any kind of money out of World War II. Everyone else was at a significant loss. That's why America had to go over to Europe at the end of the war, not long after, and issue a Marshall Plan to pretty much give Britain, France, and Germany some money to work with. And we also did the same thing for Japan and South Korea at the end of the Second World War, and then right afterwards, the end of the Korean War in 1953. So another example, just to give you all another example of when wars don't really make that much money, World War I really didn't make anyone a lot of money either. Britain and France almost bankrupted themselves again in the First World War, and also Imperial Germany bankrupted themselves to the point that they actually had an entire communist revolution called the Spartacus Revolt, not similar to the one that occurred in ancient Rome, but they called it the Spartacus Uprising inside of Bavaria in Germany, of literally nothing but communists because the economy was that bad off. Nobody really makes money in a war in the long term. Sure, some arms industries and war industries do make war. Don't make war. They make some money off of the war. But in general, for most of the economy, it doesn't make them a lot of money. Because think about this. Think about this, folks. If a economy as a whole system puts its money into stuff that produces more things to sell, that's making money. If an economy puts most of its money into instruments of war or war implements that have no other function rather than fighting a war, and they can't really be converted or transformed into anything else post-war, that is an end of itself. there's nothing to really be made out of that that will further produce more economic activity. It's an economic dead end. You're just pouring money into something that's never going to return an investment. And that's why a lot of people always go with the idea war makes money, but in reality it doesn't. Otherwise, there would be a war going on endlessly. Russia and America or China and America would just be at war all day every day until the cows come home because it would make both sides a great deal of money. Instead, it's peace
Well,
that makes money.
I think what the people say when they say that war makes money is they're referring to the companies and the people that own the defense companies. They're the ones making the money because the countries never make money from it. Like it's a lose-lose game for the countries doing it. But for the people that manufacture the weapons, they're making big bucks off of it because obviously their sales have gone through the roof. And also another thing as well, when a government buys weapons from these defense contractors, typically there is no sales tax on those weapons because the federal government is immune from state and local taxes. And also, obviously, it's the federal government, they're not going to tax themselves. So they don't have to pay taxes on that. So that's another thing as well that's quite a bit different. But no, the companies are making big bucks during war.
Some companies are, but when you generally look at other things, for example, like say the destruction that a war brings, it's not really bringing a lot of money to anyone. Like, look at all the companies that run oil refineries in Russia that have had the refineries bombed out to where they're not even operational. All the money they put into operating those refineries and paying their workers to function the refineries to be able to try and make a usable, sellable product, it's all gone. It got bombed. They can't even run that refinery. They're literally hemorrhaging money every single time a refinery gets hit. So all of the Russian oil industries are going under. The agricultural industries are going under because there isn't really that much money to be made because of the kind of damage that's being caused because of this war on other industries. People aren't really having that kind of money to just go around and buy all sorts of things. And on top of that, the sanctions implemented on Russia is making it even more difficult. Another extension of war, meaning that a lot of those companies like we're seeing today are going bankrupt. Like if you look at Russia as a whole, outside of the war industry, nobody's making money. Everyone's losing money in this war right now, including the Russian government.
Maybe so, maybe so. But for example, like to prove my point, like for example, in the United States is not at war yet, but the government is preparing like we're about to go to war. They're buying a lot of weapons, they're buying a lot of ammunition, shells, etc. So you might notice in the United States, the defense contractor stock is going up typically. It's typically a surge in their stock because the more sales they get, obviously the more valuable the company becomes because they're making more profits. So I think in Russia, you'd see the same thing. I haven't really checked recently, so I don't know for a fact, but I would believe that it makes sense that those companies selling more weapons to the Russian government typically would have a higher valuation and therefore make more money, enriching the shareholders and also the top people that run the company as well.
Maybe so, but I would generally say, based off of the historical example, wars do not make money. Like just on a historical level, speaking of World War I, World War II, or any other wars that have come since, unless if it's a low intensity war that really doesn't impact a country, or like the United States, like for example, say the Vietnam War or the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, where it doesn't have any direct effect on the home front, and it's something that just kind of burns in the background quietly and doesn't really affect most of the civil industries, wars generally do not make anyone any money. I could list off endless examples of countries that went bankrupt and collapsed because of wars, because there's always a loser, and even the winners come out not really that good to boot. On top of that, like for example, like a lot of people may not know this, Gandhi in India is not the reason why India became independent. Britain was bankrupt at the end of World War II, and when they started to look at India, they went, we don't really make a lot of money out of governing India anymore because a lot of the goods that once made a great deal of money, like tea, they're really worth nothing now, and we're pouring a bunch of money into administering the British Raj, which is what India was called at the time. Actually, the British Raj was Bangladesh, India, and Pakistan all combined into one. So when Gandhi started to starve himself in public, they just went, oh, this is a perfect opportunity. Goodbye, everyone. You're independent now. And then they just left because they couldn't even afford to maintain their colonial holdings. That's really why the British Empire ended, was because they ran out of money to even administer most of their empire at that point, and so they just started releasing mass swaths of it. France, on the other hand, was different. They actually tried to hold on to their colonial holdings, and they'd usually get their asses beat in the process, like the Battle of Dien Bien Phu, which ended in 1954 in a resounding French defeat, which is what created Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam as independent countries, and also Algeria, which was one of the larger French holdings inside of West Africa, and the Algerians, in the end, pretty much just beat the French out of Algeria. So with that in mind, I hope that I hope that addresses that well from at least my perspective. Because on different perspectives, some people might say the war makes money, but from a historical perspective, I've never really seen a country come out better from a war rather than the United States at the end of World War II. Most of the time, it ends up being pretty rough for everyone involved, but rougher for the loser. But with that, I hope that does address.
Israel comes out pretty good. I think they're the exception.
Man, Israel kind of special. Israel kind of special.
I think
like
they
that.
are. I think Israel's very special with that. Israel has a way of waging war and making it to be a positive thing. They turn lemons into lemonade, I guess you could say. The Israelis are very good at that.
Man, they kind of really good at that. Like, I really don't know how to explain how it works for them, but I think some of that U.S. government, military spending subsidy that they get, that's about half of their, it's literally 100% of their military budget annually, kind of helps them out a little bit with that, because they technically have on paper a $50 billion budget, but they only pay for about half of that every year. So I think that's one of the big things that helps them out a great deal. But one thing I will give them credit for, because this is something I've been noticing has been blowing up inside of arms markets around the world, is the Spike ATGM. This thing is actually pretty decent, apparently, from what I've been able to hear. It's a fire and forget anti-tank guided missile system, kind of like a Javelin, but it's extremely effective. They're putting this thing on everything. Like Matthew, that sauce that had that ad, I put that shit on everything. Everyone in Europe is putting
Frank's sauce. I put that shit on everything.
Man, this ought to be the slogan for the Spike, because they put that shit on everything, everywhere. Like, every single European modernized vehicle I'm seeing, they have a Spike on it somewhere. I can bet you money that if I went and showed you right now whatever CV90 some country in the Baltics was using, I can promise you they have a Spike ATGM connected to this thing. Hell, better yet, let's try and prove that. Let's try and prove that really quickly. CV90, because everyone in the Baltics uses these. So CV90, let's go take a gander. What specific variant does Estonia use? Because they use these. So, let's see here. Bushmaster, where in the world is it? So somewhere in here, it'll say Spike ATGM on one of these specific variants. Let's see, in Afghanistan, we don't want these. Here we go, Estonia. Let's see, that Estonia rebuilt. Huh, so apparently they actually use a Javelin. Huh, that's pretty interesting. I swore, like, hold on, folks. I gotta find the spikes. They have, like, spikes on a lot of CV90s, interestingly enough. And apparently they're wildly effective from what they say, at least in testing. So that's why a lot of countries are using them. Because also it doesn't require for the tank to be, the armored fighting vehicle to be in direct line of sight to be able to fire a spike. The spike is actually a fire and forget ATGM. So you can actually fire this thing and immediately back away while the missile is still flying to its target. So unlike Bradley, which uses a TOW2, which the TOW2 is operated through a cable. It's a little cable that's connected by a spool to the Bradley itself, and that's how they're able to guide the TOW in flight. This thing is able to just look at a target, identify it, lock onto it, fire a spike, and then immediately run away. They don't have to sit there and guide the missile into the target. So it's a big improvement in a sense, and allows for more of a fire and maneuverability than other forms of conventional ATGMs like the TOW currently provide to other kinds of APCs. But unfortunately, I know that the let me go find this really quickly. The Boxer APC. I know that this one has it because the Vilkas, which is what the Lithuanians use, all of their Vilkas are actually equipped with the Spike ATGM system. So let me go get that really quickly, and hopefully I can show y'all one that has it deployed. So, there it is. That's the Vilkas. But this one, I cannot visibly see the Spike on. I'll be dipped, folks. I don't know why they're making it this hard for me to find the spike. I started talking about spikes, and now they're like, oh, you want to find one? Screw you, man. So they're not even letting me find one to show y'all. But y'all, take my word on it. These things have spikes on them. I promise y'all. It's just that I cannot find a picture quick enough to show it. But anyways, with that, it is time for us to move on into the next bits of news that we have, including the frontline news in Ukraine, and also all the other major developments that have happened through East Asia, the Indian subcontinent, and the Middle East. But before we get on to that, I do want to make sure that we get another question here from the folks out in the audience, because we have been able to hear that the Kurill Islands are now out of gas. So Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about that as well?
All right, so we are seeing the Kurill Islands, which are right above Japan and right off the Russian coast, are now out of gasoline, according to all the Russian reports, and it looks like it's not going to get better anytime soon. So what are your thoughts about that new development? So about 69% says the first steps to gas collapse, while 16% said they will have to use vodka, I guess, and 11% said it's just some outlying islands and not that big of a deal. And I think the reason why you're seeing the Kurill Islands really get hit hard by this is it's harder to get gasoline to those islands, and it's also indicative of the fuel shortage on the Russian mainland. So the first places that are going to be affected is going to be Crimea. We're seeing that. We're also seeing it on the Kurill Islands as well. Basically, anywhere it's more remote, it's going to be harder to get gas there, and they're not going to get that there first. They're going to allocate most of the gas to the Russian mainland, specifically around the areas where most of the elite live. So I think that's why we're seeing the Kurill Islands get hit first. I think this is the first steps to a gas collapse because the Russians aren't really proposing any real solutions to fix it, and nobody's really coming to the rescue at present. So not really sure what they're going to do with that. I'm sure they're looking to India for help, but it's not clear if India's going to be able to bail them out. But also, by the way, just to clarify this, by the way, you can use vodka to run a car, but you'll probably destroy the engine really quickly unless it's modified. Because the water content in 80 proof vodka is about 60% water. So it does burn at least a little bit, but you're going to destroy the engine. The engine might seize up, or it's going to cause corrosion in the engine or something like that. So you can run it, but it's only going to run for a short while, even in something like a Lada. But Enforcer, what say you?
Honestly, man, that sounds like you would start to have a buildup of steam inside the cylinders because of the explosion, most likely vaporizing the water and turning it into steam from the compression. I feel like that would end up possibly blowing up the engine block. Like I'm not an engineer or anything.
I don't think it would blow the engine up necessarily. It'll just be probably expelled as exhaust gases, but it would probably bog the engine down so bad with all that water vapor added in. It would probably constrict the combustion in the chamber, which would probably choke the engine out, would be my guess.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like it's a good thing to try. Like generally, it doesn't sound good for engine life. But still, now we know you can't really use that for a car. Technically, you can, but not really. But nevertheless,
Also, what are people talking about Everclear? Like, let's see here. Everclear. Everybody keeps saying that over and over. I'm not an alcohol person, so I don't know. Let's see. Everclear is a line of spirits made from grain and bottled up to 95% alcohol by volume. It's 190 proof. My
oh my
God, what the hell?
god,
People drink this? Like, this is something that people actually drink? Let's
that's for
see.
your platinum tier
Uh,
alcoholic.
Geez, I tell you what, I think you actually could run a car on Everclear. Let's see here. Can you run a car on Everclear? I think you might be able to. Let's see here. Let's see here. It only has 5% water in Everclear. So it's 190 proof. So I think you could actually run your car. You'd have a much better chance of running your car on Everclear than you would like normal 80 proof vodka. So yeah, I think you actually could run it off of this. I'm shocked that people can drink that. Like I might have to pull that up later and see somebody actually drinking that stuff because that seems like it would destroy your esophagus lining or something. That's crazy.
Dude, they said that Maltai was tough. Wait until they hear about Everclear. Bro, people are like Maltai was literally used to clean wounds by the by Mao's Red Army as they were marching through the area where Maltai is made. It's like they have nothing at all on Everclear. Like Everclear is a whole other level. Not only will it sanitize wounds, you can use it as a paint thinner. Like it's just a next level sort of a thing. But beyond that, very interesting to hear about. Did not know about Everclear up until now, and now we know. We know a little bit more. The more you learn every day. But with that, it is time for us to move on into the next segment of news that we have, which has a lot of other major additional news developments in it. But before we get into all of those, I do want to take a quick moment to address some questions from the chat. So Matthew, what do we got?
All right. So also, by the way, it looks like it started a very fierce debate in the chat about the Everclear here. Someone said, yeah, once they can drink it once. Oh, that sounds ominous. I'll take your word for it. Also, someone said they're going to get the liver treatment. I don't know what that means, but I'll take your word for that too. I don't think I'd ever tried that anyway in the first place. I'm not drinking anything that's like straight up like ethanol or 190 proof. That sounds like you don't like your life too much drinking something like that. So I don't know. Like I'll have to pass on that. But moving on to our super chat questions here. This one goes to Thomas Miller, who puts in a $50 donation. And thank you very much, Thomas, as well for that generous support, by the way, and one of the largest super chats of the night. And Thomas said, hope the day off was a good one, and thanks for bringing us the news we need.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support, Thomas Miller. And the day off was pretty good. It was actually pretty decent. I used the day to kind of sleep a little bit, not really, but beyond that, it was a pretty decent day. Kind of sat there, still worked on the map a little bit. Not really, because I was actually trying to read up, because the next country in line was going to be the Belarusians, and then I started to research how their military worked, and then I found out that the Belarusians really don't even have a military. It's more like a support force for the Russian army, which is a whole thing to explain. But then I was like, okay, so why not try and model the Leningrad military district? And then the Leningrad military district was incredibly tough, and I was really overwhelmed by that because it's very confusing, extremely confusing to the point it really makes no sense. So then I was like, okay, so the Russians are so backwards ass, it's going to be really difficult to depict what this looks like. So then I was like, okay, so now I need to figure out what I'm going to do rather than them, because I kind of want to hold them off to the last because of how damn difficult they're going to be. So now I've decided I'm going to do Poland, which wasn't really my first pick because they have like 52 brigades. So just to give you a little bit of an idea of how difficult that's going to be, the whole of the Baltics has something like 18 operational brigades in it, including that German. I believe it's the 52nd Panzer Brigade that's a part of the 10th Panzer Division. I think that's technically what it is. Or it's the 52nd Brigade, a part of the 10th Panzer Division. I think that's the way it works. But yeah, I gotta end up modeling all that. Which is kind of like the easy, well, it's like the hardest thing to do for NATO because every other military in Europe is smaller than Poland's, but that is still a nightmare because it's 52 brigades and then their entire structure above that. And each, I think it's like 4 brigades has 1 division command, and then each division falls under, well, several divisions falls under a corps, and then they all fall under the land forces inspector, and then they also have a pretty sizable air force that also has to be modeled as well. But they are absolutely great. I mean, like, when I look at the Polish military, the Lithuanian military was really well organized, especially for how big it is. It's only a division with 3 actual fighting brigades. Poland is like the task organization master. Like, if y'all looked at the way their military is organized, it is so awe-inspiring. It's like, wow, it's like an American army. Like, it's that well organized, incredibly good. Like, I was really impressed with that. But they will be the next ones that are put on the map. I'm just, and also, by the way, folks, I got to say that the Ukrainian military, because that's also another one that's going to be mapped, that one's confusing, but because it's wartime and because they just raise brigades out of the blue. Like, Russia is just weirdly organized because, but Ukraine is weirdly organized because they just be like, we need more men, raise a whole new brigade. Hell, why not a whole new corps? And so then that's confusing because you have to try and follow along with that. So Ukraine and Russia are going to be the most difficult ones to actually depict. NATO is really easy though because they make it as simple to follow as possible because they organize, like, the armed forces nowadays are organized where an idiot could do it. So it's really easy to follow, like, once you know how it works. But beyond that, that was how I kind of spent my Monday, to an extent, was trying to figure out what is next on this map, and it's going to be Poland. So to all of our Polish viewers out there, congratulations. Not only is your armed forces impressive, it will also be displayed properly on this map to give it its honor and accreditation that it deserves. And then Germany will probably be next after that. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that incredibly well, Thomas Miller, and a huge thanks to you so much once again for enjoying us bringing the news that y'all need, and not only that, trying to make it as well informed as possible, and going to the insane, torturous links to depict every single unit in NATO on a map. So with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next super chat here goes to LC39A, and he throws in another massive support like he's been doing for weeks now. And thank you very much, good sir, for that $144 donation. Very massive, the largest one of the night, actually, and we appreciate that very, very much. And he said, hey,
Hello, LC39A, and a massive thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep running, because it is folks like you who have helped to make this channel possible for years and are helping us to make it possible for quite some while. I've got to say that you've been throwing in unbelievable support every single day that we've been on air over the past few weeks, and I got to give you an incredible thanks and a huge shout out, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this channel running, and we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. And so a massive, big hello to you once again for the support, and thank you once again for the insanely massive help to keep this channel running and keep it on air every single day. And so with that, we are on to the last question. Also, Lord Cog said, does he go up by $1 each donation? Yes. So this is, I believe, the 44th or 45th super chat, because he did throw in a 100 Canadian as his first. And with that 0 added in, this is actually the 45th super chat that LC39A has thrown in. But also sometimes he throws in donations to the Sunday fundraiser. I know that he threw in a 143 and a 142 Canadian dollar donation to this last Sunday's fundraiser. So not all of them are super chats, but it's just in sequence of each super chat or any sort of money that's thrown into the channel, either into a fundraiser or through a super chat, it goes up by 1. So with that, I hope that does address that question the best I can, because LC39 actually has his own classification method for the super chats and also donations to fundraisers. But with that, a big thanks to you so much once again for support, LC39A. And with that, we are on to the last question in the segment, and then we're going to be getting on into the rest of the news.
All right, and that one's going to go to Rick Galenchin, another channel legend, by the way, from Canada. He puts in a 50 Canadian, and thank you very much, Rick, for that support once again, and we appreciate that very much. And he said, greetings from Vancouver.
And a big hello to Vancouver. We like Vancouver. Vancouver is an interesting place. I've always wanted to go to Vancouver and Vancouver Island. I've always heard cool things about Vancouver Island. And I've got to say a massive thanks to you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. All the way up there from Vancouver in Canada, along the Fraser River. Take a look at that, the Fraser River. And you'll have a really interesting international airport, the Vancouver International Airport. They've got a statue. Actually, that's a pretty cool looking airport. Look at that.
Some interesting stuff. It looks pretty interesting.
They have a totem pole. So this has a very Native American theme. I forgot what tribes were up in this area, but very interesting sort of a theme. But beyond that, I got to say a huge thanks to you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep rolling, because it is folks like you who have helped us make this thing possible all the way from Vancouver, Canada. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And also, that is a great question, actually, in Hansa. You said Vancouver, British Columbia, or Vancouver, Washington State? And you know what? That's a great question, because let me go check his super chat. Did it come in US dollars, or did it come in, let's see.
It came in Canadian.
So it is Vancouver, Canada, because you're very observant. There actually is a Vancouver, Washington State right here, actually, which is also Vancouver. That was very confusing to us, because we actually heard someone say, oh, I'm getting off at Vancouver while we were on the Coast Starlight train to Seattle. And then they got off right outside of Portland, and we were like, the what? And we were like, Vancouver's in Canada. Turns out there's also a Vancouver here just north of Portland. And it's a pretty big city too. But outside of that, a big thanks to you once again for support, Rick Galitchin, and helping this channel to keep on running. And of course, with that, it's time for us to move on into the rest of the news for the night. And boy, howdy folks, do we have a lot of it. Moving us on over into the East Asian news for a moment, we were able to hear that there has been a major purge that has now been continuing inside of the PLA. We've already been able to hear of He Weidong being removed a little while ago. He was the vice chairman, but now we've been able to hear that the Central Military Commission has been cut from 7 members to only 4. And this is a pretty interesting time, because this is the leanest that the Central Military Commission has been since Mao's era. And on top of that, it appears that he's trying to get rid of anyone who generally is a Maoist and not a Xiist. So that is an interesting development, and it's letting us know that there are a lot of continual growing pains and issues with Xi Jinping bringing forward a Xiist China instead of a Maoist China, which the PLA is a huge subscriber to. We also were able to hear that the Chinese have created a copy of the HIMARS. Anyways,
Oh my god. What kind of wheels are on that thing, man? Look at it. It's like on bicycle tires or something. That is not the appropriate tires for that. Look, they're even like flexing and stuff when they went around that corner.
I'm not going to
This
lie.
is a joke.
So this is apparently a HIMARS copy that they're using in military exercises.
What's it on, like a wheelbarrow chassis or something? That thing is like bending, flexing, and bouncing. Look at that.
Bro, look at that. Oh my god.
That has got to be the thinnest axle I've ever seen. That thing is not going to hold up, man. This is like, look at that thing. Look at it move. Look at that. That is terrible.
Oh my god. There's the engine.
Dang, the engine's exposed.
Oh my god.
It's not even shielded.
Oh my god. I cannot believe this. Oh, this is
How the hell are you
terrible.
gonna have an armored cab and the engine is like exposed to the wide open?
Oh, by the way, this is never going to be used in any real military sense. This is just so that way they can drive it around, so that way the People's Liberation Army in a military exercise can get familiar with what these things would look like in like a thermal camera or something like that. That's what these are for. So they're not going to be used in any real military sense. It's pretty much just like a cheap mock-up kind of a target thing they made, but it still is cheap and definitely made as a mock-up for a target.
I was about to say, if they're about to use this in battle, I was about to say we're about to whoop China's ass when it comes to fighting the war, because this is going to be this is not going to be good for them. For mock-ups though, it's not too bad. That explains what's on a wheelbarrow chassis at that point then. But my God, man, I tell you what, this is truly a Temu vehicle here. Truly,
bro. The Ukrainian song for the HIMARS goes la 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 la. Hi, Mars. This one comes around the corner.
like slobbering and stuff.
I'm a HIMARS too. It's like, no, you're not. No, you're not. But anyways, moving on from that. And out of China, I guess you could say, folks, that after that whole bridge collapse in Shanghai and that shitty thing, I guess you could say, Shanghai, yeah! But anyways, moving on from that and on into India, we also get to hear that India is now cutting 20% of their oil purchases from Russia, but they're not cutting them out all the way. So it does appear that the possible sanctions or tariffs against the Indians will be coming round the corner. We don't know when, we don't know how, and we don't know if. Because we all know that the president is the president. He can do whatever he wants. So we don't really know if the tariffs are going to be implemented against the Indians or not, but they are cutting their purchases by 20%, for whatever that counts. But moving on from that little bit of news, it's also time for us to move on over into the middle of the East, because we have been able to hear of some other developments within this area. And we have been able to hear that the Islamic Republic of Iran is now calling the Russians a scam. That's crazy. A senior Iranian politician says the Iranian-Russian alliance is a scam. He claimed Israel wiped out a significant part of Iran's air defense after the Russians gave the Israelis information on all of Iran's air defense sites. The official, Mohammad Sadr, appointed by Khamenei to his advisory council, attacked what he called Russia's treachery. He said, "This is how Russians are." You know, I never thought I'd agree with the Iranians on anything, but this I could actually agree with them on. He said, this is how Russians are.
I would agree with them on that too. Does this mean that since the alliance is coming to a crumbling halt between the two, or at least they're saying that, I doubt it's going to come to a real crawling halt, but does this mean they're not going to redeem the alliance?
I guess it means that they won't. Like, it doesn't, like, this is a key advisor to Khamenei, so if they're working off of what he's saying in public today, it doesn't really look like this alliance is going to be lasting that much longer. So, well,
yeah, I wouldn't redeem. Do not redeem.
Man, words never better spoken. Like, it's never better spoken than now. But moving on from that, it appears that the Iranians do not redeem. And we will be moving on down into the West Bank, where we were able to see in the West Bank town of Ramallah, the Israelis were conducting a little raid. Why? I don't know.
Looks like it's a very, very wide open raid there. No secrecy with those vehicles pulling up. You see those, and you know they're military for certain.
Man, the secrecy, man, I gotta tell you. But remember, Matthew, everyone in Israel is sworn to the Shin promise that if they ever talk about operational security, they will have their shins hit with a baseball bat. They call that the Shin bet. So we do know that that is the reason why they were able to make it this far in clearly marked military vehicles. But we also were able to hear that the Egyptians have publicly announced to the world they are going to be building up their army along the Gaza Strip to stop the Gazans from fleeing the Israeli Defense Forces. So it appears that the Egyptians are going to ensure that no one is able to escape the whole thing going on in the Gaza Strip at the moment. They're going to make sure that everyone's in there while the Israelis are clearing out the whole strip. So, a little bit interesting with that. It appears that the Egyptians have their priorities set. Whether they're good or not, it's one thing or another. Because it's a little bit interesting how the Egyptians, on one hand, will sit there and call the Israelis inhuman with how they treat the Gazans. But then when the Israelis start pretty much conducting a military offensive through Gaza, and then the Egyptians say, okay, if any of you Gazan people try and cross our border, we're just going to shoot y'all. It's like, how in the world can they sit there on one hand and say that the Israeli treatment of the Gazans is inhumane, and then do this, and on the flip side, and then keep a straight face? Like, they gotta have some sort of messaging consistency here, and it really doesn't appear that they do. It appears that they're very one-sided with this whole sort of approach to the Gaza Strip. But anyways, with that, we will be moving on from the middle of the East, but before we move on from the middle of the East, we do have to talk about that whole problem that Iran and Russia are having, where the Iranians are saying that the Russians are scammers, which is a little bit interesting. Usually that's held for other countries, but beyond that, Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about that as well?
All right. So now that the Axis powers are accusing each other of being scammers now, do you think the Iranian and Russian relations are going to break down completely? So 52% said yes, the alliance between Iran and Russia will fall apart, while 23% said no, they will maintain relations, and 18% said it's just a temporary issue and it'll all blow over in time. And I would say that they're going to have to keep the alliance going. It doesn't matter what the Iranians are saying. The Iranians have nowhere else to turn to. So they need China and Russia's help. So they will keep the relations good. Now, calling Russia a scammer, that's not exactly an unknown fact or something like that. Russia's not known for really holding their end of the bargain at any point. But that's a wild accusation to lob at your, quote unquote friend when you literally have Shahed drone factories inside of Russia. Also, Iran sends them drones as well, and Russia provides weaponry back to Iran in return. Not really sure where the scam's coming into play. Maybe the Iranians are just mad because they're still coping from being kicked in the ass during that 12-day war. But Enforcer, what say you?
I think the Iranians are coping. Also, did you notice that he admitted that pretty much all of Iran's air defenses were just obliterated without them actually operating once to defend the skies? Like, he admitted that today, and I think that the reason why he's calling the Russians scammers is because the Iranians scammed themselves into believing they had a fair chance at even fighting the Israelis due to their incompetence. So
I bet the Iranians probably wanted some like newer weapon system that Russia's manufacturing, if that's even a thing at this point. And then the Russians probably said, we'll think about it. And the Iranians are like, you scammers, you told us you were going to support us. It's like, well, they're going to support you to an extent, but not like that.
Yeah, I think that's generally what might have happened at some point, because it's like the Russians don't really have like an invested interest in Iran much. Like, the only relationship they really have is that Russia license produces the Iranian kamikaze drone, but that's about it. They don't really have a bigger relationship outside of that. And also, it's a little bit stupid to call the Russians scammers, considering that the Iranians still have a contract out that hasn't been fulfilled yet for 30 Su-30 SMs that they still haven't gotten. It's like, the Russians at this point could just cancel the contract. It's not like it would hurt them to do that, because they're already hurting in enough ways. Adding that on wouldn't hurt them too much extra. So it's like, maybe not the best idea to call them scammers, unless if the Iranians want a MiG rolling backwards through the city streets of Tehran and then straight into a famous gate or something like that somewhere in the city.
It could be the Iranian officials, they're getting dehydrated and they're getting delusional. When you don't drink enough water, sometimes you feel like loopy and lightheaded and stuff. Because, they still have water in Iran. They're still out of water. I'm sure the leaders have some bottled water they're getting their hands on by smuggling it in or something. But everybody else, though, is getting delusional. They don't have any aqua. So they're having some trouble. So maybe they're getting delusional.
Man, maybe that's the answer. Maybe that's the answer. The Middle East is an interesting place, though. Very, very interesting. But I gotta say this, folks, by the way. I've been watching some videos from some travelers out there on YouTube of China, and China has a very interesting way of treating foreigners that are there as tourists. Honestly, they treat you like a third-class citizen while you're there as a tourist, It's a little interesting with that. And I was thinking while I was watching those videos today, also India is hell on earth. Like, every video I've seen, nobody ever has anything good to say about the place. And it looks like there wouldn't be a lot good to say. Like, the place is literally, like, overflowing with trash on every street. And, but anyways, beyond that, I was thinking, like, just right then, I was like, man, if you went to, as a tourist to Iran, I wonder what that would be like.
I don't think there's such thing. There's another word that starts with a T that's in Iran, but I don't think there's any tourists in Iran. I think it's a different type.
Man, when they say tourists in China, they're like, oh, you mean visitors? Man, in Iran, when you say tourists, they're like, do you mean people who travel for fun or people who travel for terror? It's like, oh, you can't really tell in Iran, they kind of all mix together. But anyways, moving on from that, it's time for us to get on into the rest of the news that we've been able to hear in the periphery. We have been able to hear that things are getting a little hot out there in the Caribbean. Take a look. We're actually considering sending a guided missile cruiser down there, as well as another attack submarine. So it does appear that the U.S. is building on up our forces down in the Caribbean. Outside of that, we were able to hear empanada eater Nicolas Maduro stated that 15,000 troops are being deployed as U.S. warships are approaching. That military uniform does him wonders. Looks like a zebra.
That's the leopard print right there. That's the zebra print or something. That's a really tough looking uniform, like in a really bad way right there. And also the name strips are like way too small. It looks like something that they got out of the toy store.
Man, I gotta be honest with you. That's rough. But anyways, beyond that, we also get to hear that apparently they're deploying their own ships.
Bueno, saludos a todo el pueblo de Venezuela. Estoy aquí reunido en el Comando Estratégico Operacional con su comandante, general en jefe Domingo Hernández Lares, revisando todo el despliegue ordenado por nuestro comandante en jefe. Es un despliegue que está destinado a reforzar una gran operación que ya se desplegó a inicios de año en la región del sur del lago, los municipios Catatumbo, Semprún, que llamamos...
They just show the Great Lakes? What the hell is that?
I don't know what he's showing. He said, we're going to send these ships out and we're going to rocket them and into oblivion. It's like, what's he talking about?
Where the hell is that? Like, where the hell is this, man? Like, I'm looking at this. Okay, look at this. This is a very distinct area right here. There's a small little inlet, a large lake, the lake of Maracaibo.
He's new. Give him a break, man. He's new.
Oh!
Like, he just came in here, man.
It's this lake.
That lake. So they're going to protect the lake. I didn't know we were going into their lake. I thought we were just like on the coast.
We are deploying our ships into the lake because the U.S. Navy is certainly going to be inside of our lake. But this makes no sense at all. Anyways.
Catatumbo, Semprún, que llamamos Operación Relámpago del Catatumbo. Hoy lo vamos a reforzar con 15,000 efectivos. Con 15,000 efectivos.
We're going to skip forward a little bit. Unfortunately, I do not speak Spanish too well, so he keeps on talking about the lake to a great extent. Actually, this whole video is him talking about that one lake. So they're sending warships out, in their words, to the Caribbean, and they're talking about this lake the entire time. And I'm going to be honest with y'all, I don't really see a lot of places that the Venezuelan Navy could be stationed at here, if they even have one at all. So I'm going to generally tell y'all that I think this guy is talking about some sort of lake security and not deploying ships into the Caribbean, just based off of the context of that video. So it appears they're on top of things. Nevertheless, moving on from that and into the United States of America, we were able to hear some developments. We have already been able to hear that Exxon is preparing to re-enter Russia if talks succeed with ending the war in Ukraine, although that doesn't appear that will ever happen. And we also were able to hear that the United States has stated again, at least to European leaders, that the U.S. will coordinate security guarantees for post-war to Ukraine to deter future Russian aggression. Notice the U.S. isn't involved in that. It's done another 180. Senior U.S. officials clarified that Washington would provide intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, command and control, and air defense support for European-led ground operations. So now America's backed off once again off of being in the ground as a peacekeeping force in Ukraine post-war. Looks like they did it again. Can you believe it? Another 180. That's crazy. But, once again, we do have to remember, folks, that the president can do whatever he wants. It's not like he's democratically elected and there's any balance of powers or anything. It's a dictatorship these days, so he can do whatever he wants. But moving on out of that, and out of the United States of America, and on into Belgium, we were also able to hear that more F-16s are going to be provided to the state of Ukraine by Belgium here within this following week. The specified number was not made clear, but more F-16s for Ukraine can only do good. Hopefully they will be able to have enough spare parts to be able to keep these planes flying at the full operational capabilities of the airframes. Outside of that, we also were able to hear that inside of Estonia, near the area just west of the city of Tartu, which actually houses the Estonian 2nd Brigade, we were able to hear that apparently some sort of an unidentified drone has exploded within a farmer's field within this area. We do not know whose drone this is, and Estonian authorities are trying to investigate the matter, but they don't really know whose drone it was. It could have been a Ukrainian drone that veered off course because of electronic warfare interference in Russia and ended up exploding Ukraine, or it could have been a Russian drone. Nevertheless, the Estonian authorities did state that even if it is a Ukrainian drone, they will not blame Ukraine. The incident only happened because of the Russian war in Ukraine, meaning that no matter whose drone it was, the Estonians are blaming the Russians. So I like to hear that. I like to hear the Estonians go, "We're going to investigate whose drone this was, but even if it is Ukraine's, we're blaming Russia." That kind of goes hard. I'm not going to lie. Good job on the Estonians. But moving on from that and on into the rest of the news that we have for the night, we have also been able to see the damage at the elastic gunpowder plant, and it doesn't appear that the factory buildings were elastic. It appears that they were fairly rigid. The explosion blew them away. This is what was here before, and this is what is here now. It's gone. So most of the gunpowder factory has been literally blown away by the gunpowder they produced. We also were able to hear, outside of that, on the front lines, some fairly interesting developments. We were able to hear, near to the area of the Sumy front, the 225th conducted an assault today with their Bradleys. Take a little look. There goes the Ukrainian Bradleys, pioneers of the modern fighting era.
So the Bradley, a personnel carrier, bring that thing on. Let's send it right to the front. Let's have this thing and be the hardest charger the world's ever seen, man.
Man. And they're going right into the Russian positions. Look at him just charging straight in, blasting him in the meantime with the Bushmaster.
They built a damn good weapon right here with this one. The Bradley's such a good thing. They love these too, like so much better. They love these a lot more than they love those AMX-10s that the French gave them a while back. Like they love the Bradley so much more.
Man, the Bradley is just the goated. Like it's very goated. It's an amazing APC. Also, the Russians were bombing their own oblast today in Kursk.
Снова здравствуйте, односельчане. Вчера
Welcome back, villagers.
я вам показывал, что у нас на дороге лежала бомба. Вот, пожалуйста, тут, где она лежала.
Oh,
Яма в мой рост, 1,70 м. А это ее последствия. Вот дом и летняя кухня Юры Воловченко. Вот,
And summer
если вы
kitchen.
видите, пожалуйста, это
I think this guy might be a little sauced.
ее последствия. Соседский домик, он у бабушки был. Это дом пожилой, вот еще. Это дом пожилой пары Вити с Таней. Теперь жить негде. Собственно говоря, вот все вы сами заметили. Любителям ТикТока и Телеграма, которые говорят, что об этом не пишут, поэтому этого не бывает. Вот оно. Сейчас еще пройду домик Саши, покажу.
Oh yeah, show
Нашего
us Sasha's
инженера.
place. Or engineer. That's Sasha's the engineer. Like, wow, this guy knows everybody, honestly.
Bro, this guy's got this village has an engineering battalion. That's crazy.
Чтобы видели. Вот.
Well, that's the end of the clip right there, but it does appear the Russians bombed their own people. Nothing new, really, but moving on from that and into the location unknowns, we also got to see that the Ukrainians got their third Black Hawk due to a fundraising campaign where 20,000 citizens of the Czech Republic raised some money to be able to get them another Black Hawk. So this Black Hawk is a part of the Internal Security Service. They go hard, and I think they're really cool. So great to see they got a third one. Moving on from that and into our next bit, we also get to see that the Russians are still running out of a large amount of logistical equipment and efforts, and they're once again using donkeys.
Oh no, not the donkeys again. Beast of burden. They literally have burdened these things down with a lot. Like they're carrying the Russians' hopes, dreams, and everything on those backs.
Bro, these donkeys are like, why in the world am I out here carrying 6 backpacks? like it's like, why am I doing this? But moving on from that and out of that little bit of news, we also got to see the Russian casualty reports, and they were quite nice.
Oh wow, we got 2 bobcats today. What do you know? That's a damn good catch right there. Also, by the way, I was told by Miss Disa, the keeper of the records, that yesterday there were 4 bobcat losses. So they suddenly reappeared on the menu like the featured dish of the night. We're having filet mignon today because they're taking out bobcats left and right. But that's very good to see. But Enforcer, tell us more.
Man, I've got to tell you, it is nice to see. Miss Disa, keeper of the records, actually stated that the actual number of tanks lost today was 4. 1,134 as the total is correct. Troop losses now over 10 days as an average is around 1,000. August is the lowest average since early 2024. Drones make a rare dip below 100. Special equipment makes second appearance in 2 days, which is, of course, amazing to hear. Over the course of the past 24 hours, we've been able to hear that 890 Russian soldiers have been wounded and killed in battle, along with 3 APCs, 97 supply trucks, 4 main battle tanks, 33 artillery pieces, 95 drones, and 2 Bobcat skid steers. All in all, today was a very good day. Moving on from that and on into the rest of the news that we have in this area, we will be moving on down into the area of the Severonsky Forest, where we were able to see that the FPV drones of the Signum unit were striking the Russians near to the area of the woods. See them flying.
Look at that.
Oh, is it the KAMAZ? Whoa. Oh my god! Bro, that KAMAZ went nuclear. Like it's like it had a fusion reactor in it. Look at that thing, bro. Look. When they hit it, that is not a normal explosion.
it's bringing the electricity sound with that one. That it's like literally what it was.
Bro, they hit that thing and it turned into Palpatine and went like it shut off. But we can now see them hitting an outpost inside the woods. Oh, look at a little Russian. Bliad. Oh, the tree didn't help him. Look, it's a KAMAZ. It's a fuel truck KAMAZ.
Oh no.
Oh, так-да. Old to your mind. Now we can see them also hitting a shed. Oh, look, it's Vadim. Oh, he's gone. And that's the end of the clip, but it looks like they were getting some pretty effective hits in the area. Outside of that, we also got to see more Russian forces getting hit by the 60th Mechanized Battalion. Oh, is this an artillery piece? A D-30, perhaps. Oh, it's gone now. It's a D-nothing. We see them hitting another outpost. Oh, what's it? An MT-12. Holy moly. Old as Methuselah. And this is
bringing out the museum for this one. I tell you what, they emptied out the whole Russian museum. They brought it out here and said, "Here, comrade, fight the Ukrainians with this." And he said, "Oh, thank you so much." And they're like, "Oh, it doesn't work that well. That's not good."
Man, just like my granddad in the Great Patriotic War. Like, oh, look at a little ammo cache. Oh, they got that good. They got that good right there. Nevertheless, the Russians have made no ground in the Severonsky Forest over the past 24 hours. Outside of that, moving down towards Bakhmut, we also got to see the 45th Separate Artillery Brigade destroying 6 Russian guns.
There's one.
Oh,
there's two. Look at the Russian. Oh, he had a fire extinguisher. Go back. That's the first time I've ever seen a Russian with a fire extinguisher on the front lines. That is crazy.
Oh my god, it really was. Dude, that is
he had a fire extinguisher. I can't believe that. Can you believe he hauled a big, huge fire extinguisher around with him to the front? That's wild.
1,280 days of war, and that is the first time that we've ever seen a fire extinguisher. Not even joking. First time ever. Got to give the Russians credit. They finally have evolved a little bit. But outside of that, the 45th was continuing to target and destroy their artillery pieces. Oh, toasting.
Burning.
Oh, and there's the D-20 that was left over after everything burned down.
Do you think that Russian had the right code or like the right designation of fire extinguisher? You know, there's like A, B, and C or like something to fire extinguishers. They're like, you can only use A on wood fires. You can only use B on like a car fire or like an oil fire or something like that. Like there's different like types of fire extinguishers. I'm sure they got the wrong one.
I would bet you they did, man. Honestly, like I would like, counting on the Russians to ever do anything competently. You're counting against the odds, really, at that point.
Also, someone said that was no fire extinguisher, that was a gun. I've never seen a gun chuff foam out of it. No, that might be that Looney Tune gun, but that's not the gun we're familiar with. But someone said here he stole it from a Ukrainian building. That is possible because I really doubt he hauled that huge fire extinguisher like all the way to the front lines. His commanders probably wouldn't let him do that. I would imagine that's a huge thing to carry along with him. So he might have actually maybe stolen it. It's possible.
Maybe, possibly. But moving on from that and down into Donetsk, we also get to see what Donetsk looks like as of today. Take a little look. Okay, we're going to be muting the Chinese hyperreal music that they play over CCP propaganda of Xinhua, or whatever city that they're trying to show up and be like, oh, look, it's the future.
They needed a fire extinguisher a long time ago at this place. It's a shame.
It's a real shame. But the Ukrainians fought over Donetsk tooth and nail. The Russians paid heavily for every block taken inside the city.
I will say though, like the resilience of those commie blocks is like unseen before. Like those really do hold up well. Like of course the exteriors will have been scorched, but at least the building's standing. That's kind of crazy.
Man, and they're made entirely out of prefab panels. It's really crazy, really, actually, when you think about it. Actually, I think these, technically, I think the smaller ones, they're like 6 stories tall. These are the Khrushchevkas, made during Khrushchev time. I think the taller ones here are actually, let's see, what would they be? Brezhnevkas, which are a little bit different. Because there are 3 main styles of buildings that existed in Soviet republics. There was the Leninevska, the Stalinka, the Khrushchevka, and then the Brezhnevka. All those are like 4 distinct like architectural eras. So I think this is a blend of the 2. But whenever you look at a post-Soviet city, they all look almost the same, because they all use the same building techniques, building designs, and everything else in between. But nevertheless, we also got to see some Ukrainian forces from the Tsunami Regiment of the Assault Brigade of the National Police breaking into Donetsk today to blast away a Russian command post. Take a look at this. And we're going to be muting that. That sounds copyright. And this Ukrainian police officer is like, we told them to cease and desist, and damn it, they cease to exist. Like, man.
This guy right here, his name tag says Stark on it. Surely his first name's not Tony. Like, that would be ironic.
Yo. Oh, my God.
Oh. Man, call him Tony Stark because I guess he's taking down the building like Iron Man. That made no sense.
Yeah,
Hold on a second. Let's see here. Let's there we go.
Well, you know, it was an attempt. Like, an attempt was made. Oh, look, this is Morgan, actually. We see them talking about the operation. Looking at the architecture. Ah, yes. An old Soviet house of culture. That's what this is.
I tell you, that Tony Stark guy right there, the guy with Stark on his name tag, he is either extremely built because that dude's got some wide shoulders, or he's wearing like a crap ton of clothing underneath that like vest he's wearing, one or the other.
Now I wonder which one it is, actually.
Look at him. This dude's like, I think he's wearing stuff under there. I think he's like got some coats or something under there. Is this guy otherwise he's huge.
Yeah, I mean, this guy's a pretty beefy guy. If he's not wearing any undergarments under that thing, he might be beating people's, like undershirts and stuff.
Okay.
But he might be out there, crushing Russians barehanded. Like.
What's his name? Tony Stank.
Tony Stank.
It said, I have a package for Tony Stank. This guy said, who for me? He said, I have a package for you, my friend.
Ukraine is not weak, man. But we can see them making their way through the building. They're like, how do we blow up this palace of culture? Because there's Russians inside. It's no longer cultured. He's like, here, let's place the landmines in piles around the main support columns of the building. So that way when we blow it up, it really blows up. He's like, okay, everybody, it's time for the fun. Let's drive down this way. I will lead y'all there. We can see the MRAP passing by. We see them dropping out the bombs. I think those are bombs. They drive away. They are bombs. They're taking them inside. Like they just tossed a whole bunch of bombs out of the back of that MRAP, and now they're throwing them into the building.
Dang, like they got us chunking it at him too. Like just like, here, take this. He just rolls it over there. It's like, isn't that a live like tang mine?
And technically, it doesn't have the fuse in it. So they're not like it's kind of like a bullet. If you remove the primer off of the back, it really can't go off.
Interesting.
Unless you shot it, then it'd blow up. But potato. That's neither here nor there. But this building's about to be here and over there. That's a lot of anti-tank mines. Y'all seen the power of a single one of these. They got like 8 of them on each column supporting the structure of the building. So this thing's about to go up like y'all saw at the beginning of the clip.
Also kind of interesting they had the UN humanitarian thing on the wall in there. Kind of interesting.
Oh, and there goes the building. That was the end
Oh,
result.
look, it's that one we saw.
Yeah, so this is the one we saw at the beginning. They like showed the beginning like of what happened, and then they showed their build up to it. But a pretty impressive operation by the Ukrainian National Police. Moving on from that, we also got to see the 28th Brigade in this area also targeting and hitting Russian forces. Take a little gander. They're just slamming them.
Hitting them hard. They're really going in and getting them good.
They're slamming them, Blade. Oh, right on the track. It looks like it demobilized the vehicle, and then they went in to finish it off.
Let's see, someone in the chat said, according to subreddit Non-Credible Defense, the USA can win a nuclear war. Oh, totally. Yeah, yeah, totally.
Absolutely.
We would win a nuclear war. Absolutely. The U.S. and their nuclear might, some say it's the biggest nuclear power you can see on the planet. Oh, yeah, totally.
It's not like everyone could just fire back. it's like, that wouldn't happen.
They're trying to live up to their name.
honestly. I love how everyone's national nuclear scenario never involves the enemy firing back. Like, Russia says they can destroy America in a nuclear hellfire, and never consider the fact we can just fire right back at them before we get killed. And it doesn't really seem like anyone here in America ever thinks of that either, that the enemy can fire back. There is enough time for them to be able to do that. But moving on.
Yeah, and even if something malfunctioned or something was wet, you'd see every Russian within a 100-mile vicinity would run out with their Bic lighter and try to light the thing manually. Like they would be doing something. They would try to make that thing work. Even if some of them were rusty, they'd find some that worked.
Man, for every single Russian. Does anyone have some liquid propellant? Everyone comes running out with their Smirnoffs. Here, like, take it. But anyways, moving on from that and down to the Pokrovsk front, the effective encirclement still exists for the 7 brigades that are around the area of the town of Fedorivka. However, we have not been able to see that this has become a complete encirclement yet. We were able to see the Ukrainians are continuing to take prisoners in this area.
Следующий.
Прошу поменять меня на ребят из Азова. Прошу поменять меня на ребят с Азова. Прошу поменять меня на ребят с Азова. Прошу поменять меня на ребят с Азова.
Прошу поменять меня на ребят с Азова.
Man, I love to hear Frozone giving his 2 cents on who he wants to be exchanged for. Great on him.
You know what I think would be a good idea with these guys right here?
What would you think is a good idea?
I think it'd be a good idea if they exchange these guys for the guys from the Azov.
You know, I think that's a brilliant idea, Matthew, and it looks like they're all asking for that.
Oh, look, they taped the Ukrainian national anthem lyrics to that guy's face.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's some on that paper. It's sheet music.
Man, at some moment, man, this guy's name is Alexei. They're going to be like, Alexei, play the Ukrainian national anthem. He's just going, man. And then, he starts singing it because the lyrics are right on his face. Anyways, moving on from that, they did get more prisoners in the area today. Moving on out of that area, however, we did get to hear that the Russians have caused the absolute tragedy around the area of Dobropilia. And this one will take a little bit more of seriousness. Here was the action that created the crisis today. The Russians bombed the area. Now, that doesn't seem like a big deal. That's a fairly normal thing. Problem is that there's actually an active coal mine at Dobropilia. And when they dropped these bombs on Dobropilia today, they actually knocked out the power grid, meaning that they knocked out the elevator lifts into the mine at Dobropilia. Right now, there are about 140 Ukrainian miners that are currently stuck in the mine at Dobropilia. So right now, they're trying to figure out a way to restore the power and to be able to get these miners out of the mine shafts that they are stuck in right now inside of Dobropilia. So there is currently a bit of a crisis going on there at the moment. And I know a lot of people are like, well, why in the hell were they mining there? Generally just about 10, 15 miles off the line, people are still conducting their daily lives everywhere. It's only until the front line gets about less than 10 miles away that they start to move people out. And considering that the Myrnarad breakthrough was conducted so rapidly and then crushed so quickly, they didn't deem it necessary to actually evacuate Dobropilia or anyone working there. But the Russians ended up still bombing Dobropilia today because the 1st National Guard Corps is around the area. And it's created a massive situation. So hopefully they will be able to get those miners out of the mine, because right now it's a bit of a serious situation. But moving on out of that, and on out of the area of Dobropilia, and further on south into Pokrovsk, the Ukrainians did make the Russians pay for this sort of an action today. The 68th Jaeger actually was able to destroy a rare Russian main battle tank in the area. There it is. Tank.
You're gonna do it. Pack the tank.
You have to make sure to hit the tank in its engine bay. Like that.
They said it was a rare Russian tank, meaning it was working.
Some people say, I like my Russian tanks rare. I say that I like them well done. but anyways,
They
moving
said,
on.
excuse me, Ukrainian forces. Can you please go and hit that tank? Who's there? Who's that? It sounded like a ghost.
He really is a ghost. Rest in pieces. but moving on from that, we also get to see this Russian motorbike assault being stopped dead in its tracks. Dead in... Y'all know what I mean. Anyways, it was done by the 38th Marines. Look at that. They're motorbikes. They're just laying out, helpless, being destroyed. They sit there and say that the Russian motorbike units are actually regulated on what they can do on the front. I actually heard that someone asked, regulated? Why are you regulated? You should be able to do what you want. So it's kind
Totally
of
not regulated. I've heard like the rumor that they call the Ukrainians the regulators these days because they come into the Russians' territory, or not the Russians' territory. They come into the Russians' little hidey holes over here and they regulate them. They say, "You're not coming out of the hidey hole today. Go back in there," and they put the regulations on them.
Man, they'd be like those people from The Shining, man, like Delbert Grady. Have you ever seen that movie where he's like, I corrected them? Like, remember, the Ukrainians are going around correcting them. But also, we got to see that the Ukrainians are clearing out saboteur groups from Pokrovsk. This is how they do it in the 155th Brigade. This is a Leopard 2A4 of the 155th, by the way. Need to clear that up. It's of high German quality. And they're like, saboteur groups, clear them out. So they just start slinging HE into the buildings.
Give him that he.
Man, in the words of Michael Jackson, Loda, load that he. And then they load up the high explosive.
They fired it at him and said, Shimone.
Man, honestly, man, I would have loved to see Michael Jackson in the army as a tank commander. Driver, hit that forward. and then he goes forward. Driver, stop. Loader, and then they load up Edie, and then he says, "Gonna Shimone," and then they fire at him or something, bro. Oh my lord. Anyways, that's the end of that clip right there. I gotta tell y'all, Michael Jackson as a tank commander would have been something else. I wonder, like how they put like the names of like the tanks on the gun barrels. I wonder if he would have put Neverland on the barrel. I don't know. But anyways, moving on from that. Indeed. But moving on from that, and down towards the area of Velika Novosoka, we were able to hear the Ukrainians are conducting a near-effective encirclement today of 2 Russian battalion tactical groups inside of this area. So it does appear that the Ukrainians are starting to encircle Russians all over the place. Not only 7 brigades effectively encircled up near Pokrovsk, but now 2 battalion tactical groups that are around the area of Zaporizhzhia right there. So very nice to hear. But moving on from that, and on out of that clip, and further on down and into the area of Mykolaiv, we also get to see the Russians are still continuing to attempt their targeting of civilians, moving down the M14 highway. Here's the clip.
Власне, наслідки вчорашньої атаки дронів на цивільне авто. Бачимо, одна машина стоїть, хендайка.
Wow, that didn't hold up very well.
Not really.
Ще стоять машини, на жаль, які потрапили під атаку дронів. Ще одна навіть горить досі. І там ще одна машина. Тому, друзі, такі справи.
And we'll be muting this part because there is copyrighted music. But the Russians are actually attacking civilian vehicles traveling up and down the highway which of course poses a significant risk to public safety inside of areas where civilians are, and of course it is resulting in civilian fatalities. This is a war crime, and it does appear that the Russian Federation doesn't really seem to care and continues to push forward with their war criminal-like activities. So with that, we are going to be moving on from that clip down around the area of the M14 highway at Mykolaiv and Kherson, and moving on up to Kyiv to cover the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on day 1280 of the war. Give me a minute, Zelensky. I got to get through my little intro. So without further ado, here is the speech. Peach!
Бажаю здоров'я, шановні українці, головне за день. Дуже активно контактуємо з усіма нашими партнерами в коаліції охочих, різні рівні, і військовий, і політичний, Європа, Сполучені Штати Америки. Головнокомандувач, міністр оборони, МЗС, Офіс, всі, хто потрібен, всі задіяні. Кожен день контакти з нашими партнерами, перемовини, зустрічі. Важливо, щоб все було максимально практичним. Які сили на землі, у небі, на морі. Все має бути чітко визначено. А основа безпеки сильна, наша українська армія, наші українські сили оборони, а отже, фінансування довгострокове для армії, забезпечення зброї, все це буде. Я хочу подякувати кожному партнеру, який вже з нами. Важливо збільшити темп роботи над усіма деталями. Сьогодні я говорив з британськими військовими, начальником штабу оборони Британії, чинним та його наступником. Я вдячний за підтримку. Ми обговорили і фронт, і наші перспективи, і ключові основи майбутніх безпекових гарантій. Дуже цінуємо нашу співпрацю з Британією. Зараз на тижні будуть контакти з Туреччиною, будуть контакти з країнами Затоки, з країнами Європи, які можуть бути майданчиками для розмови з росіянами. З нашого боку все буде максимально готово, щоб війну закінчити. Важливо, щоб партнери це підтвердили. І надалі все буде залежати виключно від волі лідерів світу. Передусім від Сполучених Штатів Америки. Щоб тиснути на Росію, потрібні нові кроки, новий тиск, санкції, тарифи. Все це має бути на столі. Ми говорили про це з генералом Келлогом вчора. Ми працюємо з американцями дуже змістовно. Після нашої зустрічі в Вашингтоні ми маємо нову основу для спільної роботи. Це суттєво. Росія дає сигнали виключно про те, що збирається і надалі ухилятись від реальних перемовин. І це можна змінити тільки сильними санкціями, сильними тарифами, справжнім тиском. Робимо і наші кроки, які можуть вплинути. Я хочу подякувати за влучність нашим воїнам. Українські дрони, українські ракети дійсно добре працюють. Російська логістика, російська паливна інфраструктура це відчувають. Сьогодні були військові доповіді, також Василь Малюк, голова Служби безпеки України, українські активні операції, захисні наші операції. Ми будемо все це продовжувати. Інших варіантів ворог не залишає. Ще кілька речей. Говорили сьогодні з прем'єр-міністром України, зокрема про підготовку до зими, до опалювального сезону. Дуже важливо збільшити відповідну співпрацю з нашими європейськими країнами, партнерами. Є хороші домовленості у нас з Норвегією. Також потрібно більш активно працювати з Єврокомісією. Щойно провів я нараду з дипломатичною командою, МЗС, Офіс, всі. Ми готуємо нові контакти з лідерами країн-партнерів. Ми очікуємо, що найближчі тижні будуть дуже активними. Я хочу подякувати усім, хто нам допомагає. Слава Україні!
And Hiram Slava. And we actually have breaking news coming out at this moment. So, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so we do have some breaking news right this minute. The IL-20 Coot, the Russian surveillance aircraft, is back again near the Alaskan airspace, and it looks like NORAD has once again dispatched F-16s, a KC-135 tanker, and an E-3 to surveil and run the airplane back off again. So, like we mentioned before, this is becoming extremely frequent, and this does prove the Russians are specifically conducting surveillance on something in Alaska. At this point, it's happened so many times that it's confirmed at this point. They're doing doing something, but we don't know exactly what they're going for. So the coot is back yet again. This thing's becoming a regular staple over the last week or so, and it's consistently back. So, Enforcer, what say you?
Well, the old coot is back and at it again, and that thing is actually quite old. The I-20 coots are like from the 50s, but it is back and at it again, and it's once again trying to conduct some reconnaissance of something within the area. It's just that we don't know what or why. Why? Why is this happening? I don't know. But they are trying to gather some information on something that they deem to be incredibly important inside of Alaska. So, with that in mind, thank you for sharing that breaking news with us, Matthew, but it does appear that the coot is back. But nevertheless, it is time for us to move on into the second segment of this stream where we get to talk to each and every single one of y'all. And this is going to be an incredibly fun time. One of the times that we look forward to the most every night, because we get to talk about literally anything and everything except for politics, religion, climate change, or whether the A-10 is good in combat or not. But still, we have many great things, many great, wonderful things to talk about tonight. I'm sure we do. And so, Matthew, I understand that a lot of people are actually talking about a little poll that we've been running for now. And, Matthew, what are people thinking about it? And what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so the poll says Ukraine says deep strikes into Russia use only Ukraine-made weapons. So the question is Ukraine able to fight without the United States assistance? And 57% said no, the Ukraine still needs assistance, while 22% said yes, Ukraine does not need U.S. weapons, and 16% said Ukraine is very close to being weapons independent. And I would say that Ukraine is certainly making big strides. They've come out with the Flamingo, which is a very, very potent weapon that's not really been fielded yet on the front, but it will be fielded very soon. Also, they just released today an updated and modernized Neptune missile, which has a very long range on it. It's capable of hitting Moscow, just like the Flamingo is capable of hitting Moscow. So Ukraine has a very potent deep strike weapons at this point. I would say that's a certain thing we can say with a fact. But the one thing that is a fact as well is Ukraine will always need U.S. assistance because they have the F-16, which is American. They'll need parts for that. So they have to stay in the U.S.'s good graces for those parts. And also, they need ammunition to go with the U.S. weapons. So I'm with the 57%. They're always going to need U.S. assistance. They're never going to be truly weapons independent unless they start changing all their weapon systems, which would be pretty much impossible at this point because they're deeply entrenched with U.S. weapons. So I'm with the 56%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to do with 56% as well. I think that the Ukrainians will still need U.S. assistance because while the Ukrainians can conduct deep strikes inside the Russian Federation entirely on their own without Western support, that does not mean that they can conduct artillery support, tank support, or any other kind of support on the front lines without U.S. support. They are operating a great deal of U.S. weaponry that requires 5.56 standardized cartridges. That means that has to come either from a European country or the United States. And considering that the United States is the largest manufacturer of 5.56 ammunition cartridges, it seems to be a high priority that they would get that from America. Also considering that the Patriot air defense systems, which is pretty much what they built their entire air defense perimeter on, at least in the heavy caliber, entirely relies on American-made missiles. Once again, they rely on the United States for their air defense. They rely on the United States for their artillery support because they use the 155 millimeter artillery pieces, such as the M777, the Panzerhaubitze 2000, among many others, which once again requires 155 millimeter artillery shells, which either can be provided by a European country or the United States of America. The United States of America, being the largest manufacturer of 155 millimeter shells, they still have to get American support. So the basic answer is that while they can conduct deep strikes on their own, they really can't conduct much anything else on their own without a great deal of American support. And I think that it's imperative, whether they could survive with or without American support, that we continue to support them because it only hedges their odds to victory. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so now moving away from our poll, it is now time to move on to our super chat questions and our live chat questions and our Morse code decoders of the stream. So jumping right back into our super chats, this first one is going to go to Just Chillin', a channel legend, by the way, and he puts in a $50 donation, and we appreciate that very, very much, Just Chillin'. And also he said many thanks for all the hard work and grab one from the chat.
And a big thanks to you for enjoying all of our hard work. We try our best, and I hope that we have some minimal success. And I got to thank you so much for enjoying our hard work and always having been with us and supporting this channel, Just Chillin', because folks like you help this channel to be possible and help us to keep this thing running. So a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well, and we will make sure to get a live chat in your honor, Just Chillin'. So Matthew, what do we got?
All right. So, Just Chillin's live chat question goes to Roby from the live chat. They said, I've seen videos about a Russian nuclear reactor being hit. And have you seen or heard anything about it? Now, I'll tell you, Roby, the one thing I have heard, I haven't seen that. I will say that right off the bat. I haven't seen the video of any nuclear reactor being hit, but the Russians did claim, at least in reports, that a Ukrainian drone was shot down over the Kursk nuclear power plant. But that was only a Russian claim. There was no really evidence to back it up. And also, there was a fire near the vicinity of this plant, but we were told it was a brush fire and not caused by the drone. So at this point, we really don't know what's happened, but I haven't seen any reactors on fire. If that was the case, we'd be seeing huge radiation spikes. We'd hear about that in the mainstream news and everywhere else too. So I don't think that's the case. But Enforcer, what say you?
I haven't heard of that. I would also have to say that if something like that happened, that actually would be something that would make it onto the mainstream news headlines like CNN or Fox, because that would be a major deal. That would be like Chernobyl getting hit, or something along those lines. A nuclear reactor or a boiling vessel getting hit ever is going to make international news. So the fact that that hasn't been making the international news cycles, and the fact that we haven't heard about it, means that it most likely did not happen, and that's most likely a sensationalized story that some people are putting out to get clips. There was an electrical substation fire at the Kursk nuclear power plant, but we haven't heard of anything else beyond that. So generally, from what we know, that information would be untrue. And whoever you got that from, you might want to give them a second look, because they might not be telling the most accurate news out there. Because if something like that happened, I can promise you that we would be reporting on it. Our business, like, just to explain this really quickly for folks who may not know, our business is news. Like, we do cover news topics around the world, and we do support American and Western interests. But at the end of the day, this is a business, and our main business is telling news. So that means that we have to be on top of the ball as far as news coverage of major events to be able to be viable as a business, because a large part of the news, or really news coverage, is virality. Just to kind of explain a little bit about the business model. So whenever anything happens, you generally have to be one of the first to the story, because if you're one of the last to the story, you're picking up crumbs, and it's not really successful from a business side of things. So if something like that did happen, we would have been reporting on that in an emergency breaking news stream quite literally immediately, as soon as something like that would have happened, because that would be quite literally international groundbreaking news. So if something like that didn't happen and we didn't hear about it, it most likely did not happen. Not to say it's impossible that it happened. Maybe something like that did happen out there and the whole world's blind, but the chances of that happening is slim next to none. So I hope
It's rare. It's rare that we miss something. Like, we have missed things like on occasion, but we have such a wide range of sources now from multiple different platforms, Telegram, Twitter, sources that feed us information. It's just hard for us to miss something. And also, we do have other ways to get information as well that we sort of get the news wire from. So for us to miss something, it'd be a rare event. Like, for example, we didn't miss this one that just happened a minute ago. Apparently, U.S. tariffs on Indian goods have doubled to 50% over Russian oil purchases. Apparently, that's gone ahead, and that's changed right this second, actually.
Also, I see some people saying a cooling tower fire. If y'all are talking, the only cooling tower fire that's ever happened was the one that happened at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant.
That's the one they're talking about.
Okay, yeah, well, I mean, like, that happened years ago, folks. That was like 2.5 years ago. Like if we were covering that today, we're pretty behind the game. That was 2.5 years ago at this point, and it would have been in the cooling towers that were right here. It was one of these. So
I saw somebody doing that yesterday. I saw somebody taking a picture of in fact, we used that picture in the thumbnail back like a year ago when we covered the event while it was happening. It was a fire underneath there. The Russians had set some tires on fire underneath the cooling tower, and it made it look like the cooling tower was on fire. But that was from old times. That was not anything recent.
Yeah, let me go get the picture. This is the picture. This was a long time ago. How long ago was this? Years ago at this point, like 2 years ago at least. Let's see.
Yeah, it was a long time ago. Also, for the people claiming that's the case, tell us, is that the picture that people have been showing you? Because I see people saying, no, it's 3 days ago. I'll go do some looking. I'll do some double checking here while the enforcer talks some more about the question. I'll see.
Well, let me check this really quickly. Cooling tower. I'm not even sure if there is an operational cooling tower at the ZMPP. It doesn't look like there is. Usually these sorts of reactors don't necessarily have that kind of a style of cooling tower.
Also, by the way, I find this ironic. When I punched in Kursk nuclear fire on Twitter to find some information about it, a tweet that I put out about a year ago on August the 9th of 2024, it was literally a tweet saying that Russian sources claim power has been disrupted at the Kursk nuclear plant after a drone fell on the transformer substation, causing a fire. Literally identical to what the Russians claimed this year as well. And we had no corroboration of that in August of last year either. That was just the Russian report then as well. So it almost sounds identical to what they're claiming literally just a day ago.
1 second. I need to find. Someone said, so hold up. So now I'm seeing it. Someone actually gave the source. So that appears to be misquoted by a lot of people because they didn't say it was a fire in a cooling tower. They had a picture on their thumbnail of the cooling towers of Kursk 2, which is a power plant that isn't even operational yet. And they also didn't show a fire in that thumbnail either. And then they just said that the fire happened at the substation at the power plant in their description. So I guess a lot of people took it that because there was a picture of the cooling tower in the thumbnail, that the fire happened in the cooling tower when that didn't happen. It was the electrical substation down here that had a fire happen, and it was not anywhere up here. Also, really quickly, this isn't even operational. The Kursk 1, which is down here, which is the power plant that was operational, is entirely off a line right now. This isn't even technically an operational nuclear power plant. The Russians have been building and are planning to open in the early part of 2026 Kursk AES 2, which is replacing the older facility that was using the RBMK reactor, which of course is infamous at this point because of the Chernobyl disaster. So they're replacing them with 2 new reactors, and these reactors, in theory, are supposed to have the power output of the 4 RBMK reactors that were a part of Kursk 1. So this facility isn't even operational yet, and it's still under construction. So there isn't really a way for there to be a fire in a cooling tower because this power plant isn't even running. So just to debunk that whole thing, that didn't happen. So I hope that does address that the best we can, at least from what I know. But really quick, let me go check this a little bit extra.
Also, by the way, I did some looking. There is no sources I can see that I usually check or I'm usually looking at that show there's been any type of fire at a cooling tower at the Kursk nuclear power station. So whoever's putting that out there is either making it up or they're using a Russian propaganda source because I'm not seeing any evidence for it.
Yeah, it doesn't look like there's any evidence for it either. And I went and clicked on the video and there's none. Like there's none at all. And also, folks, trust us. If something does happen, we are covering it. Like if that had happened, we would have been covering it, or we would have talked about it, or we would have made a video on it. Something would have been done about it because that's our business is news. While my esophagus collapses, why does it do that sometimes?
That scared the hell out of me, man. I was like, "What the hell is going on? You good?"
You know, folks, I talk enough. This used to never happen in my life, but I've talked enough at this point that my actual esophagus is just getting worn out these days. So sometimes when I breathe, it just does that. I don't know why, but beyond that, if something like that happened, we would cover it. Our business is news. If we missed a big news topic like that and did not cover it at all in any way, either on a nightly stream or a short war video or an emergency stream, we would be out of business pretty quick. So that sounds like clickbait. The best way I could say it for people who did hear about that, that sounds like it was generally clickbait. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so jumping into our next super chat here, this one goes to LC39A yet again. He puts in a 145 this time, and thank you very much, good sir, as well, for that support once again, and very generous. And he said, for the moving fund, he said, I would tell you to get out of Dodge, but it appears you're moving closer to it. honestly, we are moving closer to Dodge City, actually. That is ironic. We're moving closer to it. But one thing's for certain, Dodge City is not what it used to be. If anywhere qualified for getting out of Dodge, it would be Alabama at this point. There's nice places in Alabama, but overall, though, I'm ready for a change. I must admit, definitely ready for a change. But Enforcer, what say you?
Well, Dodge City seems to really lean into the whole Earth thing. Wow, look at that.
Oh, that's pretty cool. I would like to see this. I've always wanted to kind of see it.
Yeah, I've always wanted to see it. It's huge in American, like, kind of like folklore kind of a deal with how the nation was built. Dodge City is always talked about. Oh, is this an Atchison? It is an Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Pacific 462. I like those wheels. Very nice. I actually like this style. This is a great looking Pacific. Really neat. Dang, look at that.
Also, by the way, speaking of moving closer to Dodge, as someone said, you've never dealt with the Mormons. The Mormons were actually roaming around where we live today. I actually saw them. They were making the rounds around here. I was like, hey, look, there's some people. We grew up with some people that were Mormon. Believe it or not, in the middle of like a small town in Alabama, sort of like in the backwoods. There were actually a couple of Mormons there as well. But I saw them today as well. I was like, oh, look, there's like the Mormons right there. They're coming to like pre-initiate us, I guess you could say, before we get out there to Salt Lake City. But I'm like, I don't really have a problem with it, like at all. Like me personally, I'm like, I'm a big believer in let live or live and let live, basically. So if someone wants to be a Mormon or whatever, I'm fine with it. The only thing I'm not fine with is being harassed. I'm not fine with that. I'm also not fine with being excluded either, just because I'm not part of the clique. I don't like that either. But from what I could tell, though, it doesn't appear to be the case out there. Like that's a misconception about what I've seen.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like anything that'd be a big deal, and it's a free country. People can believe whatever they want, and I haven't, like, as far as running into Mormons, I've never had a bad experience with Mormons. Like, they're pretty nice people, actually. Like, honestly, I have a better view of the Mormons than I do, just to be completely frank, of most people who claim to be Christians. Like generally, Mormons carry themselves a good bit better than a lot of people who, go around speaking about how Christianly they are. Just to be completely frank, those people I kind of avoid because generally they say that to try and cover up for how bad of a person they are. Like, generally good Christians don't even mention that they are a Christian. They just are, and they're good people. But that's my 2 cents on that from my own personal experience. But nevertheless, generally I'm fine with Mormons. I don't really think they're that big of a deal. Also, Matty, by the way, I did not know this, but the Southwest Chief, which is an Amtrak service, actually still stops at Dodge City, at the famous train station where I think Wyatt Earp actually gunned a guy down on the railroad tracks.
Huh, that's about wow, look at that. They also called it Wyatt Earp Boulevard too.
Like, I think they actually had that in the OK Corral movie. I forgot what it's called, but it's from the 90s. And it was Wyatt Earp, and he would chase this guy down at the train station, shot him on the tracks, and he said, you tell him I'm coming and hell's coming with me, or something like that. It was actually quoted in the movie. But it actually happened at this train station in Dodge City. So that's actually pretty cool that that's still generally there. But beyond that, Salt Lake City is a pretty interesting place. Like, I've heard a lot of good things about it. It looks really good. And also, I like that it's a modern city. Something you don't really see in Alabama. It has public transportation. It has very good public parks. It generally seems like their infrastructure seems to be well kept up. Big things that you want to look for in the city. Like, nothing, like, I'm not really one for the personal politics of people or really looking into that too much. Honestly, like, the way I look at it is I try and look for a blend where it's half left leaning, half right leaning, so that way they kind of balance themselves out and it ends up being a net neutral. And it seems like Salt Lake City is one of those kinds of places. So I'm like, man, that's pretty good. And beyond that, it seems like a pretty decent city as well. So I've got to say,
also, Dubstep Kids said Salt Lake City is a normal metropolitan area, and you don't feel the super heavy Mormon presence unless you go to Provo. I saw that when I was out there. Like, if you went down toward Provo, like down toward Lehigh, you'd start noticing it right off the bat. Like, it was noticeable. Like, I'm not going to lie about that. You could definitely tell it changed, like, a lot. Like, in a sort of a bad way. It seemed a little bit like you could go places there, but at the same time, you felt disconnected for some odd reason, and you couldn't quite put your finger on it. But once you left and got back to Salt Lake City and the surrounding suburbs, you could tell it turned back to sort of like normal. I was like, okay, that makes sense. I've heard people say that about Provo, and it makes sense because Provo is literally, I think, the home of the college for like the Mormon church, I think, down there or something. So it's very heavily so. But if you go back to like downtown area, like suburbs, you're totally fine.
yeah, it seems like it's a nice place to me. And I see some people saying stuff like, there's some gangs in some parts of the city. Oh,
Gangs.
wow. Like, gangs, that's nothing new for us. There's literally gangs in every single small city in Alabama. Like, hell, there were enough gangs in Montgomery, Alabama, which is a city of 200,000 people, that you could go blue in the face trying to list all of them off. And literally all of them are in a city this big. I mean, look how big Montgomery, Alabama is. I think it's less than 200,000 people now. I think it's about 180,000 people. And I'd say that there was at least, from what I remember, at least 6 gangs I can remember off the top of my head by name that were in this tiny city. And they were everywhere. Everywhere. The only place they weren't was out here near the East Dale Mall. is this one the East Chase, Eastdale? Is this the East Chase? This is the only
That's
place
East Coast.
yeah, this is the only place they really weren't at, but then they started to get over here by the time we left. So we are used to that sort of a thing. You know, like it's nothing new, and if they're in a small area of the city, that is what it is. So, you know, like, you know, just make sure to, you know, carry yourself at peace and, you know, make sure to not go to that part of the city, really is the best way to say it.
I didn't see any gangs when I was there. Like, I didn't see any gangs. I didn't see anything like that. Like, usually if you go to a city, you'll see like tagging on the walls and stuff like that. Because, you know, if gangs like to go around tagging the territory and stuff like that. So that's a huge sign that gangs are operating in an area. If you see like graffiti all over the wall with like certain gang signs and stuff on it, it's usually a gang nearby. I didn't see any of that. Didn't see any, you know, like rowdy behavior on the streets or anything like that. Generally pretty chill at all times of the day. I even walked around the place at night. I didn't feel unsafe, like right in the middle of downtown, which it appears to be that most people that live in Salt Lake City, they say, oh, downtown Salt Lake's dangerous at night. I'm like, I didn't see anything dangerous about it. I'm like, this is considered dangerous. And go to Alabama and check out dangerous at night. That's actually dangerous. Like, they felt like Disneyland in Salt Lake City at night. I was like, I just think their version of dangerous in Salt Lake is a lot different than what we're familiar with.
I think everyone's version of dangerous is totally different than what we're used to in Alabama. In Alabama, there's like an existent danger in just going outside, which is something that I don't think a lot of people deal with in most other places. So, you know, like, I gotta be honest, folks, whenever anyone's like, well, that's a stupid statement, like someone who wants to get all high and on their high horse, Jirachi or whatever, my town does not have gangs. This is a dumb statement. Well, you know, we come from Alabama where, you know, you can just walk down the street and possibly get lit up by a gang, you know, so not really a stupid statement for us because this is where we're from and that's what we're used to. Like, hell, we had to go and we could not go to Montgomery public schools because they were so dangerous. Like, basically, that's how it went down.
I knew two people that got stabbed on their first day in Montgomery Public Schools. Like, I knew one person. I worked with one person that said, "Yeah, I went there the first day and got stabbed." I was like, "You're joking!" Like, and I was like, "No, I actually got stabbed in the stomach. Had to go to the hospital and everything, obviously." And then I knew a different person that actually went to the school we went to later that got stabbed as well going there because the gang presence was so bad in the schools. They literally put, I think that in some of the schools they put metal detectors at the door and they had to like go send them through security before they went to the school. It was really that rough.
Yeah, it was extremely rough. Like, the whole city of Montgomery was rough. You couldn't really go downtown because right off of the main street near to the Capitol, it was like a war zone. You couldn't go anywhere around Old Cloverdale. Like, Old Cloverdale was actually not that bad of a neighborhood, but once you got right out of Old Cloverdale to like Idlewild or Edgemont Heights, it turned into a shithole. The whole place, like the best way to describe Montgomery is that it was let's see, Fallujah in Iraq. It's just that the Marines never came through and cleared out the place. That's probably the best way to describe it. Like, you know, I feel
like Montgomery was more dangerous than Birmingham. Like, I actually saw people that actually like die in Montgomery. Like, we saw one person get stabbed at the gas station and bled out. We saw that
like 2 blocks
we
away.
Saw people. Yeah, you saw people getting shot as well. Like, I mean, it was really like serious. Like, I don't typically go to downtown Birmingham too often. Like, but when I do, I've never really seen anything like that. And now I know it happens. Obviously, the stats show it happens. But I actually saw it in Montgomery like a pretty good amount of times. Actually, it was very, very dangerous. Like, extremely dangerous. You would never catch me walking anywhere in Montgomery ever, unless you were like on that one main street where the Alabama Capitol's at. Other than that, you get caught walking around Montgomery, you're in some trouble usually.
There was actually let me see here. Let me go find it really quickly. I think they renamed it, but let me type it in. Maybe they still have it here. Robert E. Lee. What did they rename Robert E. Lee High School to? Percy Julian High School. So, yes, this one. So let me show y'all this one. This one is a treat. So back in the day, it used to be called Robert E. Lee High School. They changed the name for obvious reasons, and there actually used to be a statue of Robert E. Lee right there. They took it down and everything. But anyways, beyond that, it's now called the Percy Julian High School. Doesn't matter the name. This was the Thunderdome. You can actually see the dome right there. Because at one point, it was while we were still in high school, I think I was in like 9th grade and you were in 10th, Matthew. There was like some people are like, well, don't gangs protect the schools? Hell no. The gangs make the schools into war zones. Like, there was a gang shootout that happened in the school. If you remember, Matthew, remember there was the whole shootout that happened. Some members of some gang went running outside, went running down this parking lot and into the hood that was right behind the school, and then the police caught them like a couple of days later. Like, the gangs are extreme, like extreme here in Alabama.
Wait. Somebody said you won't see gangs outside like the movies. That's just not happening. You'll see a lot of people loitering. No. There are gangs outside. Like in Montgomery, there was places you could not go in Montgomery because the gangs were literally lurking in the streets. Like, they would be wearing gang colors and everything. Like, literally, the school we went to, which was outside of Montgomery, it was in a small town called Wetumpka. The teachers would literally warn that they've known people, their relatives or family members, etc., happened to go into the wrong street in Montgomery where the gangs were literally like roaming the streets with their colors on. They were wearing the wrong color and they got shot and nearly killed. Like, it was that bad. Like, the gangs were actually outside. Like, it was really that bad.
Yeah, it was pretty rough. And then there were gangs in our school, up here in Wetumpka. So, but in middle and high school. So by the time you're in sixth grade, well, actually fifth grade, because that's what our middle school covered, was fifth grade to eighth, and then the high school was ninth to 12th. Once you got into fifth grade in middle school, that's when the shit would start, because that's when all these goofy idiots that would get in these gangs would start bringing guns into school and stuff. So it was incredibly common that there would be a SWAT team that would show up and the whole school would go on lockdown, and they would do a military-style clearing of the whole school to find this idiot that had guns and ammunition in his backpack. It was a whole thing. It was happening all the time. And then there would be word that would go around. It was like living in a prison, Bradley. They'd be like, hey, yo, Trayvon's got a Glock, and he's going to shoot so-and-so today. And then everyone would be like, oh, my God. And then the police would get called, and then they'd find the guy, and he'd have the gun on him, and then they'd arrest him and charge him as an adult, I believe, at that point, and it was a whole rigmarole. And then they disappear, they go to juvie, and then they come back. They'd always bring them back, and then they do the same shit again, but in high school, and then it was a whole other problem again. And it was just endless like that. Endless. And if it wasn't like gang shootings nearly happening where we were, they were happening down in Montgomery, or people were getting like stabbed, or they were getting beat in school, out of school, everywhere. It was absolutely insane. We
went to a school where one day we left school. It was the weekend. A guy that went to the school that I sort of knew at a time when I say I knew him, I wasn't friends with him or something. I knew of him, but I knew he was also in trouble, so I stayed the hell away from this guy. But he was apparently involved with a gang, and he happened to go to a certain neighborhood where his op was, and proceeded to lay down street justice, and it became like a huge news story. I think it actually made like state news at some point. And it put the other guy that got the receiving end of the street justice into a coma, nearly killed the guy. So I mean, it was rough. Like, there was a lot of like surprisingly like gang culture going on, like at the school we went to. Even though it was outside of Montgomery, it still wasn't as bad as that. Like, that was full blown gang culture at those schools. Like, they had the metal detectors at the door and everything. We didn't have that, but it was like right on the verge of getting to that point almost.
Yeah, it's a just absolutely crazy sort of a thing that would go on here. So when people sit there and talk about, oh, it's dangerous, like to be honest, folks, we went to school in a war zone practically. It was literally like living in Chirac, if you want to put it that way. So it's nothing new. Like, if anything, anywhere seems safer to us than where we came from, because there it was like literally every day you had to think, okay, so if someone like I can tell you this, every day I went to school, I would always think, okay, so if someone whips out a gun in the middle of the school right here, where am I running to get out of school as quickly as I can? Like, lunchtime was terror, because that's when every single fight would happen or anything would happen. So you had to sit there and think, okay, so I'm sitting in this part of the lunchroom, I have to run out here. Like, if anything happens, I'm shooting out of the building as quick as I can, and I'm running as far away as I can, as quickly as possible. Like, that's the kind of world that we grew up in. So it's nothing out of the ordinary for us to go, oh, every place seems nicer, because that's not what we had to deal with. But also, I see some people talking about all kinds of stuff in the chat. I don't know how in the hell everything becomes political, because now people are going, hey, you need the National Guard. No, we don't. Like, the federal police.
They had the police in the school already. The police were already patrolling the school on a full-time basis.
Yeah, it's like here's my 2 cents, folks. If the city of Montgomery is fine with that, then that's absolutely stupid, but those people need to vote for better or come up with something better. Or the federal government can step in for a little while if the police department seems to be completely incompetent or corrupt and handle things, but calling in what's pretty much the military to deal with it is a pretty stupid idea. Like in my opinion, that's like this is a city of Montgomery and the state of Alabama. That's a problem for the city of Montgomery and the state of Alabama to deal with. If the governor wants to, she can call out the National Guard, but I don't think that that's any authority of the president's. This is a state of Alabama matter. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next super chat here goes to Mike Johnstone. And thank you very much, Mike, for that $50 support. And we do appreciate that very much. He said, why is the blind denied wall in from Gaza to Israel? I think he's meaning to say there why. He told me this in the chat earlier. He said, why are the blind people in Gaza not being allowed to leave Gaza and seek refuge in Israel or elsewhere? I think that's what his question is.
Because they are all assumed to be terrorists is the best explanation. They're pretty much like Egypt. Everyone,
The blind people?
with the blind or like the Hamas or just Gazans in general.
Well, he's saying the blind people. The problem though is I haven't really seen anything to back that up, Mike. I'm not saying it's wrong because I haven't done a whole bunch of research into it, but I haven't really seen any stories saying that Israel is telling the blind Gazans that they can't leave, like actually visually blind, like they cannot see. I haven't seen anything like that. If that's true, that's bad, but I would have to get some more evidence behind it before I just jumped into that one because I haven't heard.
Yeah, I would have to say I wouldn't really know enough on that particular sort of a situation to speak on it either, so I generally have to declare ignorance as well. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And also, Robert Planning said, "Oh, geez, fake blind." Well, I mean, that's another concern if that story is indeed the case and it's true. It's like, who's to say that people don't start claiming they're blind when they're really not? It's like, how do you have a way to prove it? Because it's not like they have medical documentation like on them to say, "Oh, look, here's the doctor's note that says I'm blind." They could just pretend like they're blind and then say, "Yeah, give me refuge," and then they end up going into Israel and doing something terrible. So it's a catch-22 with Gaza. Now, I will say this right off the bat: if it's true, then Israel should find a way to get the blind people out of there. Because obviously they can't see. They're in a war zone. That would not be fair or right or just under any circumstance to leave them in that spot. But we'll have to do some more research on it. But thank you, Mike, nonetheless, for the support. And we also have a $20 support from Luke UK. And thank you very much, Luke, as well, for that support. He said, hello, enforcers, and hello, LSA. And my question is, how many countries made up the Russian Empire? And thank you, enforcers.
And thank you for the support and asking a question. It's not really... Well, if we go back to the beginning of time, it's quite a large amount. The Golden Horde, Nizhny Novgorod, the Duchy of Muscovy, so on and so forth. There was actually a lot of them, Perm. But in general, if we're talking about the modern day, there really isn't a lot. The Circassian, like if we're talking about from the 18th or 19th century onwards, there's not really that many. Most of the people of Eastern Russia were tribal peoples, so whether they had a country or not, it's kind of up to debate. Whether there was just a tribal group that existed in that area or whether they had some sort of a small governmental function or form, it's really hard to say. But the Circassians of the Caucasus Mountains were in a nation of their own that was taken over by the Russians, and also the Chechens as well as the, the Georgians really don't count because they're not part of modern Russia. So in terms of the modern sense, not really a lot, but in terms of the medieval sense, a decent amount. But then again, every country in the modern day is made up of loads of different little countries from back in the day. Like Britain is made up of Wessex, Sussex, Northumbria, East Anglia, let's see, what was the one in the middle? Mercia, Gwynedd, Powys, let's see, then all of the different Scottish clans that existed in Scotland, and then all of the different Welsh kingdoms as well in South Wales, like Porthmadog, all those. So loads of them. But generally, if you ever go back in time to the medieval era and then talk about how many countries make up a nation, now it's like a good gazillion of them, especially Germany. Germany's made up of hundreds of princely states, even in its current configuration, with about a third of those actually being in modern-day Poland. So with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. And a big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, Mike Johnston. And I hope that answered the question the best I can. And so with that, a big thanks to you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next super chat here is going to go to AMX10 Speedy Bang Bang, and he puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Mr. Bang Bang, for that support. He said, I very much enjoyed my holiday in China in 2018, and they really love having tourists, and I'm planning to go back in 2026 to ride their 400 kph high-speed train.
And I thank you so much for the support, AMX10 Speedy Bang Bang. But generally what I mean when I was saying they don't really treat tourists well is that they treat every single tourist, if they ever get into a situation, like they're a suspected spy. One thing that's interesting about China that you won't see in most Western countries is that to get a hotel room for the night, you have to show your passport, a whole bunch of identifying papers. They have to report you to the local police, and you have to be in the hotel at a certain time of night and stay there, pretty much because they're treating you like a suspected spy. That's something that happens a lot in communist countries. They treat everyone like a suspected spy. China is not as bad as North Korea, however. Even if you go into one of those organized tour groups in North Korea, they literally treat everyone like a suspected spy. But China does it to a lesser degree. It's more so less invasive, but they still treat everyone like a potential spy. And that's something that I generally find a little bit of offense to, is treating everyone like they're guilty until proven innocent. And for terrorists, it quite literally is. You are a spy, and, well, you are a potential spy, and they treat you like that. Like, if you ever try and film in public in China as a foreign tourist, there are a lot of times the police are going to walk up to you. Why are you filming this? What are you doing? If you end up ever filming anything that has police in it, or a police vehicle in it, they're going to get you. Like, they're going to come over, what are you doing? You can go to prison for this, yada, 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 blah, blah, blah. All that sort of a deal. And so while China, it might be neat to visit, I don't really like the fact that their government and the Chinese Communist Party views every single foreigner as a potential suspected spy. But still, I do thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. But that's generally my qualms that I have from watching the videos of other people going to China, is that a lot of them ended up getting into run-ins with the law because they were filming their trips, and a lot of them were all suspected or at least alleged to possibly be some form of a foreign spy. But still...
Isn't it kind of interesting how we don't really treat, like, for example, when we bring over like Chinese exchange students from China to go to our universities here in America, we don't treat them like spies, but yet the Chinese treat us like spies if we go to their country. It's a little bit interesting how that works. I think one of the Chinese students, a research student that came from China and came over here to one of our universities, just got charged and accused of espionage and theft of trade secrets, I believe this morning, I think it was. So I mean, that's not the first time that's happened. It seems to be that China has a strategy. Now, I will say this, not every Chinese exchange student's a spy. Like, that would be unfair to say that. But there are several that have happened in the past where China will sneak one or two spies into the mix, and they'll come over here, they'll steal trade secrets, and they'll transmit that back to China, where they'll start producing whatever that thing was that they were trying to, what they were trying to get, basically. So, it seems like we probably shouldn't bring in a whole bunch of, just unvetted Chinese exchange students, not because of just any random reason, but just because the reason it could be a way to sneak spies in. Because surely vetting 600,000 Chinese exchange students, that's a pretty lengthy process there. A lot to keep up with.
Yeah, there are 18.4 million university and college seats across the entirety of the United States, and having 600,000 Chinese students, that's cutting down a reasonable portion of the available seats, like a decent bit, at least 5 to 6%. And all of those have to be vetted, and all of them are largely going to be spread out across the United States of America. And they could potentially be spies, because the Chinese now have a pretty significant record of their foreign nationals coming to America and ending up being spies. So there's a bit of a one-way street with that side of a thing that I don't really like, where they treat every American, or really anyone, as a suspected tourist if they're a suspected spy if they're not Chinese. While here in America, we'll bring in 600,000 university students from China, and under U.S. law, we don't really treat anyone as a potential spy if they're visiting from abroad. So,
also, like Ms. Disa said, there's no value if they take knowledge away from the United States. That's my thing as well, just from a geopolitical standpoint. There's an advantage to having foreign exchange students. It's a way to foster good relations with other countries. But the point of doing it is not to create large volumes of foreign exchange students, because that's not the objective. We're not trying to train the entire Chinese population on how to develop high-tech weaponry and high-tech technology for them just to take it right back to China, which is our enemy, and then start start manufacturing that technology that we taught them how to make. That shouldn't be our goal. We should actually be very careful about that, because most of these exchange students are heading right back to China with that knowledge. They're not staying here in the United States and starting a new life and working for our companies. They're heading back to China to work for Chinese companies, which are actively working to disintegrate our national security here in the United States. So, that's something they got to be a little careful with right there. It doesn't seem to be any forethought in that whole front right there, that whole topic, but they should think about it.
Yeah, I mean it's ridiculous. Really, like I'll just be honest with you, all I got to criticize that one greatly. It's ridiculous. So the Chinese are our open enemy to the point that the Marine Corps is having to model itself off an idea of just a war with China because it's that imminent of a threat. So what we're going to do is we're going to take 600,000 Chinese students. We're going to bring them to America, to the highest level educational institutions in the nation. Harvard, Yale, all of the Ivy League universities and colleges, and the rest of them across America. We're going to teach them to our grade and level of education, which is much higher than most Chinese universities and colleges. So that way they can take all of that knowledge, not benefit the United States at all off of that, and they also pay discounted rates to come here to these universities, so that they can fly back to China with all that knowledge in hand and then help out their own country. Kind of a little stupid idea, if you ask me. Like, that kind of seems to be against U.S. national security interests for the larger part, because knowledge is a weapon in its own sense. You don't have to give them a bomb or a gun to turn that into a weapon. You can just teach them something like they would be taught in these universities, and then they go back to China and they can use that to make weaponry or to further the ambitions of their state, and also help China become a more potent rival of the United States due to the innate intricate sort of knowledge that we taught these people in America. That seems like a little bit of a national security issue. Actually, it's not. It doesn't seem. It is a national security issue. And on top of that, at the same time, it's only disadvantaging the American citizen again, because now we are taking up about 5 to 6% of all of the college seats and university seats in this country with a specific group of foreign nationals. That means that the supply of seats has now decreased 6%. That means that the price for American citizens to go to university is now going to go up a little extra, because now there's less available seats, and there's still tens of millions of college-aged kids here in America that are going to have to go to college. So not only are we screwing ourselves over from a national security perspective, but from a domestic citizen's perspective, we're also screwing ourselves over there as well. It's a fairly stupid idea all around. It does nothing to benefit the nation or the citizenry, to just put it that way. Like, some people might not like that, but that's just the truth of it. If you don't like it, there's many other channels out there.
I don't think anybody really is disagreeing on that one, actually. That's one of the few issues which has become political, sadly. I'm not sure how that is political, but it seems pretty common sense to me. You don't let huge numbers of foreign exchange students come steal the knowledge from the college that is of a higher standard and then take that right back to the enemy. It makes no sense. I'll be honest, on that one issue right there, for a rare instance, it appears to be that a lot of people, or pretty much a majority of people, are on the same page with that one.
Yeah, it's a ridiculous thing. It's absolutely stupid. Where in the world, like, I just gotta ask, where in the world are they getting these kinds of stupid ideas and thinking they're good ideas these days? I have no clue. It was one. There's a lot of things that I could complain about from a domestic perspective at this point with things like that, and also from a national security standpoint. I feel like it's incredibly obvious. It gets really annoying, to be entirely honest with y'all, because I keep things as apolitical as possible on this channel, but when I see something like that does nothing to benefit the United States of America on a domestic or foreign policy level, and it's being said that this is the greatest idea of mankind, it really grinds my gears a great deal to hear something that patronizing to the public. It's not even in anyone's interest in this country to even try and say that it's a great idea and it's the greatest idea ever made to man, like everything is these days. That's absolutely stupid. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. I'll just leave that there. But with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so jumping into our next super chat here, this is a massive $200 donation from none other than BC Skyman, the channel legend. And thank you very much, BC, for that support and being one of the largest super chats of the night, and we appreciate it very, very much. He said, Utah Travel Funds, and we appreciate you guys, and best there is.
Hey, and thank you so much for the very kind words, BC Scammon, and the huge support. And I got to thank you for the Utah Travel Fund. We are going to be going and taking little trips back out to Utah here soon. And hopefully those trips will be good ones. Good ones. we're staggering them to keep the channel as operational as possible, but my trip will be from the 7th to the 10th. So the live streams will be off air from September 7th to the 10th, and there should be one running on the 11th if everything goes to plan and the flight isn't late. So so that should be the way things are working for now, at least. But beyond that, I got to thank you massively for the support for the Utah trips. And also thank you so much for the kind words, BC Scamming, because you've been with this channel for years, I says, and you've been helping us out a massive amount. So a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And thank you so much for the massive support and helping this channel to keep on running. And so with that, it is time for us to move on to the next one. But a huge thanks to BC Skyman once again.
Yes, indeed. And our next one here goes to the Wuggy Man, who puts in an $18 donation. And thank you very much for that support, by the way. They said, where are the other oil refineries located at if Ukrainians only hit 17% of production with their current strikes?
Most of them are located within Western Russia. Some of them have actually been skipped over. They just don't hit them. They go for the larger ones. But most of them are in Western Russia. Very few of them are beyond the Urals out here in the east. So I hope that answers the question well. And I do thank you for support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because it is folks like you who help to make this channel possible and help us to keep this thing running. And so a big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that was the best answer that I can give, at least in my opinion. And also, I gotta say, I see some people talking about some stuff with the Chinese foreign nationals coming to America to university in the hundreds of thousands annually. And one thing I also want to add, just as a little quick thing, is that there are a lot of decisions that have been made that could be extended to the topic of foreign policy that directly affects the citizenry in the country to a negative degree and does really nothing to benefit them, that is very annoying to that level. Like, for example, the H-1B visas. Like there are plenty of Americans here in this country right now that are having a very hard time finding those doctoral level jobs or anything that require professional experience like that. And instead of trying to make sure that they can get these jobs, we're replacing them with people who are equally educated but work for less. And that's something, like, for one, that's very exploitative of those people, and two, it's also screwing over these highly educated Americans who could also take these jobs and have a well-paying sort of a livelihood. That sort of a thing is not really something that I agree with too well. It doesn't inherently benefit the citizenry. It more so benefits particular interest groups, and that's about it. But with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so our next one here is going to go to none other than Mr. Nikolai, who put in a $15 donation, and thank you very much, Mr. Nikolai, for that support. He said, if gasoline runs out, people can use wood gas. The USA did it during the Great Depression and World War II, and vodka can be redistilled to a 95% too, and I did it and drank it. Also, by the way, do not drink that, by the way, just as a disclaimer, by the way, do not do that. Well, we do not recommend that whatsoever. But interesting. Based on what I read, Mr. Nikolai, it looks like you can use vodka in a car to run it. But generally speaking, though, it's still going to have water in it. So you can damage the engine that way. But I guess if you don't have any fuel, it's better to have something to make the car run and maybe hurt the engine a little bit than to have no fuel. Because if it's not coming back, you got to have your car. So you got to do something. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say that in my personal opinion, that is something I wouldn't really recommend. Actually, funnily enough, the Germans did try and experiment with wood alcohol. Let me go show you the wood alcohol Tiger tank. Let's see. Let me go show it to y'all. Here we are. The wood alcohol operated Tiger tank, or at least Tiger tank prototype. This never went anywhere beyond this, but they did try and convert this thing to be able to operate off of wood gas. It didn't really work too well. So I wouldn't it's like a last ditch kind of an attempt thing, and I'm sure with modern technology we could try and get it to work a little bit better, but it's not really that good of a system. That's generally why everyone keeps working with petroleum-based products like gasoline and diesel, because they seem to be the most effective or the most efficient so far for what it is. But with that, I hope that does address that well, and I do thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, 69MR, Nikolai, we wouldn't be able to talk about interesting things such as that. So a huge thanks to you so much once again, and with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Shauna, who puts in a 10. And Shauna said LSA, and thank you very much, Shauna, for that support. And while we're at it, a big shout out to Dade Carnes, also known as Raid, who put in a 10 as well. And a huge shout out to Dade and Shauna. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I gotta thank you so much for the support, let's see, Dade Carnes and Shauna for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Y'all didn't throw in comments, except for Shauna, who threw in LSA, and I gotta massively appreciate both of y'all for y'all's support and helping this channel to keep on running until this day. And so with that, a big thanks to you both so much once again. Hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Dreadnought 777, who puts in a 10. And Dreadnought says, congrats SpaceX on a successful Starship Flight 10 test launch in LSA.
Hey, and a big congratulations to SpaceX and the Starship launch. Hopefully, it went well for all of their metrics and that they're gathering more data on how to have a successful launch. And so a huge thanks to you so much for the support. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a $10 super chat from Laser314, who put in a 10. And thank you very much, Laser, for that support. And sorry for that voice crack there. My goodness, I tell you. But Laser said, I'm calling it now. Putin is cold by USA midterms. Cold. He's already really cold. He has no soul right now, I would say. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to agree. Blood is stone cold. But a big thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep rolling. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to Mechtild5, who puts in a 10. They said, how would they handle 24,000 POWs in Ukraine? And thank you, guys.
That's a good question. They probably just put them in a stockade for a while and then start figuring it out from there. And a stockade, for all of y'all to know, is just pretty much like a giant open palisade. Like it's just surrounded by a small wall. And they have it armed with guards. You know, they'll shoot anyone who tries to escape, and they just keep them there until they can figure out something better. So that's generally how it's done, is that if you have a massive influx of prisoners, you just put them in a stockade somewhere and keep them there until you can figure out something more permanent for them. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And a big thanks to you once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Duncan VR, who puts in a 15 Australian. And thank you very much, Duncan, as well, for that 15 Australian support right there, all the way from Australia. And Duncan said, if the Russian people are out of gas, they can just use vodka or do a wee-wee in the tank. And what does the Marmot say about that? Oh, man. Honestly, like the wee-wee is not flammable, so I'm not sure how good that's gonna do in the tank. I think it might bog the truck or the car down, to be honest with you. So I'm not sure. But what does the Marmot say about that? Eh?
That's a good question. What does the Marmot say about that? What does the Marmot say? Also, I was trying to, I was thinking, should we do this segment or not? Because honestly, my voice feels kind of busted today. But oh, hello there. Hey!
Oh, hello there, Governor. You got to do a little wee-wee in the tank. Oh, yes. Just got to do a little wee-wee in the tank. Yeah, you got to go over there and fill up the tank. It's it's called a tank for a reason. It's not a septic tank. It's a fuel tank, a fuel cell, Governor. But anyways, what's that old fly doing down there? What's that old bum doing down there on the floor?
Aw, man, I've got to pay the rent.
You're not paying the rent now, Governor. How's you doing this time, eh? You want to pay the rent? You're not going to pay the rent, yeah?
Oh, boo-hoo-hoo. But anyways.
You say boo-hoo-hoo? Was the rent that scary? It's a big boo-hoo. It's a big monster, eh? It's like a big ghost coming after you. Said, oh, landlord wants the rent. Oh, dear.
That's it. Waiter. Another hit piece.
Another hit piece, eh? Serve it up like filet mignon. Serving it up like an 8-ouncer. A nice quarter-pounder juicy on the grill. Oh, yes, indeed. Please, keep them coming, Governor. Keep them fried up fresh under the heat lamp.
Man, we love the Marmot segment. It's a great segment. I got to thank you for the support, Duncan VR, and letting us have a Marmot and Fly segment. And also, I got to say, I don't think pissing in the gas tank is a good idea, folks. I don't think that's a good idea. I don't think that stuff is that combustible. But still, I do thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, it's time for us to move on into the next one.
All right. So with that, moving on to our next super chat question, that is. This one goes to Jopar024, and they put in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Jopar, for that support, by the way. We do appreciate that. And they said, hello, Enforcer Matt and Enforcer, and hello there. I said, thoughts on China trying to absorb Russia and into their sphere of influence if Russia collapses?
Russia's already in China's sphere of influence, technically. They're a minor power. or regional power more so. Their economy is weak, their military is weak, and generally everything else about them is weak. So they are really a minor power in China's sphere of influence already, really.
And feeble too, because they were weak. Ukraine is strong, but honestly, they really are. Though I would say this though. One thing that is not going to happen, in my opinion, is China is not going to try to take Russia's land anytime soon. They can't afford that. They need to keep relations good with Russia. So for now, as long as they stay enemies with the West, I think Russia will be safe when it comes to that. Because China's got to hit Taiwan first. They can't hit Russia and then come back for Taiwan. Taiwan is the big ticket item for China, and if they're going to do something, it's going to be with Taiwan first.
Oh yeah, I would agree with that. Also, really quickly, I'm trying to find something here because some people were saying something about this earlier, and I was like, it would be interesting to show y'all something about this. Ah, yes, here we are. Here we are. Let me go and try and get a better graph of this. I've got to get a better graph of this. There's got to be one that shows the wartime years. Because some people were talking about, well, Russia's GDP is actually growing. You're lying. And the Russians are doing economically great. And I was like, wow, these people are kind of a little stupid. But like, at least the people who were saying that. So I'm trying to find a graph here. Because if you ever look, this is actually the best graph I can find. This at least shows it up till 1941. You can actually see that Germany's GDP started to grow once World War II started. 1939 is right here. 1940, 1941, 1940, 1941, and then it would middle and bob and bib until they collapsed. But it would stayed up pretty high, at least technically. A lot of people have a really hard time with this. Like when every economic sector is collapsing, it does not matter if the GDP is rising anymore on paper. It's not real. The Russians are misrepresenting the numbers. They're putting them out. They're fibbing them because some people go, "Oh, look at the Russian GDP now. Look, it's strong." And it's like, no, it's not. Like this is a fake number. They're cooking the books. This is going to implode. When your agricultural sector is imploding and you're going through critical fuel shortages, that is not a growing economy anymore. That is an economy that's literally dying right now. And when you had to put a moratorium on the banks going out and wiping clean a whole bunch of farmers, that's when you know the economy is cooked. Like you don't have to have a lot of brains to know that one. So that would be my 2 cents on that. But beyond that, it doesn't really appear that the Russian economy is doing all too well, to be entirely honest. But that's why they're absorbed into the Chinese sphere. They have a $1.4 trillion economy. That'd be my real estimate at it. It's probably 1.4, 1.5 trillion or less at this point. And the Chinese have a near $18 trillion economy. So in terms of Russia's economic significance, they're not even a sphere of their own. Never could they financially afford to do that. They are already in the Chinese sphere, in my opinion. So with that, I hope that does address that well. A big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here is going to go to none other than Mike Johnstone once again, and he puts in a 10 this time, and thank you very much, Mike, for that second support of the night. And you said, not for or whenever it Israel, but why do they deny permissions for asylum in for the blind, and why does any nation deny asylum for the blind over war conditions?
That's a great question. I wouldn't really personally know. I feel like that's one as far as human rights are concerned, that's a little bit above my pay grade, to be entirely honest with you. I wouldn't know the specific answer for that because I haven't looked into the United Nations conventions or any conventions about the treatment of blind in wartime. So I think I'd have to declare at least ignorance to my extent on that. But I hope that does address it the best I can. And also, folks, I finally found it. Here we are. This is the GDP graph for major European countries from 1910 to 1959. So this is the best I can find. So let me show you something interesting. Here is the beginning of World War II. This would be 1939 right here. Follow that up right there. So the German economy's GDP was somewhere around the high 300s in the millions back then. These were big numbers for their time. So look at this. All the way up until 1945, their GDP was growing. Isn't that kind of crazy? Like, it's a country that by late 1942 was losing an entire army. I think it was the 6th Army at Stalingrad. And they were getting bombed by the British and the Americans about daily, day and night, destroying most everything in Germany. Somehow the GDP was still climbing. So let me ask you all this. Does that mean that a country is winning? Or does that mean that a country could still be losing? The answer is that a country can still be losing while their GDP is climbing. Like, it would make no sense at all to go, oh, yes, their GDP is climbing, therefore the war isn't hurting them. The German GDP was climbing until they literally imploded in 1945. And you could try and make a stupid argument, oh, the Germans were economically doing fine. But when they're issuing to the Volkssturm uniforms made of paper, let's see, Volkssturm, let me go get their paper uniforms. Paper uniform, here we are. Let me see if I can show you this. Dang. Doesn't really look like a lot of them survived. But, like, obviously, they're made of paper. But they were issuing paper uniforms by the time the Volkssturm was being made around 1944. So does that really look like the sign of a winning economy? Does it really look like the sign of a winning economy that they had German tanks that were in red primer at the end of the war? Let me go get a good picture of that as an example for all of y'all. Like this here. This is a late war camo pattern. They call this tan and primer red because the red is actually the primer of the tank that they applied in the factory. The tan is put on, not because it blends in with anything, that's because that was the only paint left available in all of Germany by the end of the war was tan, because nobody used tan. So they were putting it on the tanks. So does that look like an economy? This was 1944, by the way, this tank was captured. Does that look like a succeeding economy? No. They can't even manufacture any other paint than tan. That's not a succeeding economy. That's a failing economy. So people who try and make that argument, once again, just gotta put this out there really quickly. You don't know the history behind this sort of a deal. An economy grows in wartime just because an economy is always growing until the damn thing explodes. And they will explode here not before long. That's coming around the corner. A lot of people said the fuel shortage thing was never going to happen, and we're saying that we were liars. Now it's finally happening. All those people went silent. Soon, everyone's going to be going silent and talking about, oh, the Russian GDP is fine, once the whole economy explodes like it already is in the beginning process of doing. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And also, I gotta be honest with y'all, this camouflage is actually like downright horrendous. Like this is the ugliest camouflage I've ever seen. That kind of camouflage, rough. I think there are some other examples that they have of this elsewhere. A lot of these are fake. I'm trying to find the real ones of the primer red because there was a lot of them. Like a lot of the late war tanks that came out, they were all in this primer red sort of a nasty colors scheme because they had run out of everything. But I can't seem to find any good examples of it, at least here on a quick Google search, except for this one that's in the Bovington Tank Museum. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so our next one goes to Espen Turgenhagen, who puts in a 10. And thank you, Espen, as well for that support. And they said LLC. And also a big shout out to Lanawar Shelves, who put in a 10 as well and did not leave a comment. But thank you very much, Lanawar and Espen, for that support. And we do appreciate that. And Enforcer, what say you?
I got to thank the both of y'all massively for support because y'all folks are helping this channel to keep on rolling. And so long live the Lee Spring Army. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we also have a 10 from Tom Exman, who put in the 10. And he said, can you buy some bandages for me?
Maybe. I think we could, Tom. We could try. They're getting a little bit more pricey these days. And also, man, we have to start up that fundraiser campaign for the bandages. For
yeah, remember, it starts tomorrow.
Oh yeah. I just remembered that now. I'm getting confused, folks. I'm getting confused. But beyond that, I hope that does address that well. Big thanks to you once again for support, Tom Exman. And we can try. The bandages are not necessarily cheap, but we will give it a shot. I'll give it a shot at least. So a big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Old Warrior, who puts in a 10. And Old Warrior said the Russians claim that the Flamingo looks like a British model, claiming it's just a copy because it looks like it. And it also looks like a V1. And also take one from the chat.
Honestly, the Flamingo cruise missile looks like a lot of things, really. Like, I've looked at it, and I'd be like, huh, it looks like just about everything you could imagine. It looks, well, this is a rocket-assisted little pod that's attached to the bottom of it. But this thing looks like a Global Hawk slash everything, honestly. Like, you could describe this as basically any missile, and it would kind of fit. It's really weird.
The missile knows where it is because it knows where it isn't.
The missile knows where it is because it knows where it isn't. In the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, it always knows where it is. Also, you see the bombs that they put in the front of these.
Wow, that's a big bomb.
Man, that's literally just a bomb. They just like slide it into the front. That's why these things are cheap to make. It's carrying a freaking bomb. It's not even like a specialized warhead. It's literally just a bomb sitting in the front of the missile. So now that makes sense. But beyond that, though, I'd have to say it looks like a lot of everything. The Russians always say that there's some NATO involvement in something, though. And to be honest, I like them to think that there is, because it lowers their spirits a little bit to think they're getting their ass beat by the whole combined Western world. So with that, I hope that does address that well. And a big thanks to you once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And also, by the way, in honor of Old Warrior Super Chat, the live chat question goes to Vollinger. And Vollinger said, do you think that an economic collapse would cause a rebellion similar to what the Wagner did back in 2023?
I think it possibly could, actually. An economic collapse is going to be so severe and so bad. It could bring about the end of the Russian Federation, a lot like the economic collapse under Gorbachev was a big motivator of the collapse of the Soviet Union. Because there actually was a collapse that happened economically in the Soviet Union because of some attempts by Gorbachev to liberalize the economy in a very whack-ass way. Like, it was completely wrong. And so he literally torpedoed the Soviet fixed economic system. And then he didn't even implement the capitalist system, so he just screwed everyone over. So that could be some reason or a result that could happen as an attempted government overthrow of Putin. Also, by the way, something funny for all of y'all to know. I actually didn't know this, but I started researching the collapse of the Soviet Union. Matthew, what do you think? And it wasn't the Berlin Wall, just to rule that out. What do you think was the beginning of the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991? What was the first country that tried to leave the Soviet Union that pretty much accelerated the whole collapse of the thing?
First country that left the Soviet Union?
Yeah, like the first Soviet republic that was a part of the Soviet Union that declared independence. Which one do you think was the first one to do it?
I would assume it's one of the Baltic states. I would assume.
Getting warm.
I would say I'm trying to recall. I'm trying to rack my brain here to try to see if I can recall.
Are you trying to Google it?
What? No.
Man, okay.
Google it. Google.
Well, take a guess. Which one was it?
Listen here. I'm gonna be straight up honest with you. I got a confession to make. I just Googled it, and it says Lithuania.
Yeah, it's Lithuania. Man, I can't even believe it. Like that was even more shocking, honestly, bro. I just stopped. Like I was like, oh, but it was Lithuania actually. I know a lot of people are going to say it was the fall of the Berlin Wall, but there's a bit of a technicality there. The Berlin Wall wasn't in the Soviet Union. The Berlin Wall was in East Germany. And technically, Poland, East Germany, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Romania, and Bulgaria, as well as, actually Moldova wasn't. All of those were actually a part of the Warsaw Pact. Those were not Soviet republics. Soviet republics included Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Belarus, Ukraine, Moldova, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Azerbaijan, Armenia, Georgia, and Russia. Although Russia technically never existed as a Soviet republic until the very end, and it was the shortest lived of all of them. But outside of that, Lithuania was the first, and Lithuania actually started a huge independence movement, and it had a big one growing for a while. But in 1991, in early 1991, it came to a head, and they started to demand independence from the Soviet Union. So Gorbachev went there, and he asked everyone in Lithuania, okay, so what are y'all really wanting to do? Are y'all wanting to stay in the Soviet Union or leave? And everyone told him, we want to leave. Everybody at every level, even the people who were involved in the Soviet government of the Soviet Republic of Lithuania were like, we want to leave. So he went back to Moscow to the Soviet to the Soviet Congress, I believe it was, and he said, oh, it's good, they don't want to leave. And then 2 months later, they declared their independence, much to the shock of everyone in Moscow that had heard from Gorbachev, oh, they don't want to leave, we're good. So then they declared their independence, and then everyone else was like, oh, shit, we're on a sinking ship. And then everyone else started to leave. So Lithuania, in a sense, actually collapsed the entire Soviet Union, if you want to put it that way.
I think that was part of it. I'm not sure if that's like what really collapsed the whole thing. It was a mixture of the wall issue. That was one thing. Also, by the way, the fellow that was in charge of the USSR wasn't exactly what you'd call well supported at that point. So I think it was a lot of things.
Are you Googling all this?
Oh, no, I didn't Google that. I just knew that.
I was about to be like, bro, are you Googling everything? I was like, what the? Because I was like watching a documentary on that, and a lot of people were saying that in the documentary as well. They're like, well, Gorbachev wasn't really popular anymore, all that sort of a thing. But at least as far as like all of these different Soviet republics declaring their independence, Lithuania was the first. It was kind of like how in South Carolina seceded from the Union as the first state to leave the Union right before the Civil War, and then everyone else went, oh damn, yeah, you can actually do that, and then everyone else just started seceding in the South as well. Lithuania kind of did that for most of the Soviet republics, because the whole other thing with Yeltsin that happened, with Yeltsin, actually, interesting enough, folks, there was this whole thing with Yeltsin that had already existed, who was the first president of the Russian Federation after the collapse of the Soviet Union, where during the time that they started to hold a referendum, Gorbachev did, across the whole Soviet Union about the idea of having a Soviet constitutional reform, they also held a simultaneous referendum inside of Russia in the Soviet Union, asking, should we have a separate Soviet republic for Russia itself, which it never existed, and also hold a presidential election. So they voted in Russia 70% yes, we want to have our own Soviet republic, and we also want to elect our own president for that. So when they did that, they then held a presidential election immediately in that Soviet republic, the Russian Federative Soviet Republic, the RFSR, and voted Yeltsin as the president of Soviet Russia. Not as the Soviet Union, but the president of Soviet Russia. So Gorbachev was the president of the Soviet Union, which is, its capital is in Moscow. Yeltsin was the president of the Russian Federative Soviet Republic, which was also capitaled in Moscow. So then you had two dual competing tracks of power at that point within the seat of power for the Soviet government, and that's actually what led Yeltsin to be able to build up enough political power to pretty much oust Gorbachev and pretty much declare a modern Russian Federation and declare the independence of the Russian Federative Soviet Republic from the Soviet Union.
Interesting. Very interesting facts there. A good synopsis.
Yes. Thank you. If you're so smart, intelligent, maybe the smartest person. I'm just kidding, by the way. This is stuff that you can find from like normal documentaries out there. But anyways, interesting stuff to know. But Lithuania technically started that whole thing as far as everyone leaving the Soviet Union. There was a lot of stuff that led up to that, but Lithuania was the first to actually leave, and so everyone else was like, damn, we can actually do that, and then everyone else started leaving, like Ukraine. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Big Papa Chester. And Chester puts in the 5. And thank you very much, good sir, for that support. He said, with the Zapad exercise coming up soon and Russia poking around Estonia, do you think that they would try to pincer the Baltics?
I wouldn't say it's out of the question, and I'd have to say the NATO has to be prepared for such a contingency. But with that, a big thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Andrew Honeycutt. He puts in a 5 and says, Bellum ipsum elit. War does indeed feed itself. One only needs to study history for examples, and the difference is how profitable the said war is. And LSA.
And thank you for the support, Andrew Honeycutt. But I would generally say that war is not a self-sustaining machine. War is an all-consuming sort of a thing. And that's why wars end, because one country or another in that war is going to get consumed by itself and end up collapsing and end up in defeat. Because if it was the case that every country was just fed itself and that it was like a growing monster of its own, wars would never end because both sides would just be able to match each other in ability industrially and just keep a war going on forever. In fact, it'd be better for them to do that than lose. And so I would generally say I'm still of the belief from the historical side of things that wars are an all-consuming sort of a monster once they're started. Once you start one, you can't just end one preemptively. It has to go until the finish, whatever that might be. But I would say generally wars are something to be avoided, at least for a nation, at as much cost as possible without it being appeasement, because outside of that, it's a horrendous thing to get into a war for a nation's existence. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. A big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Captain Jerry, who puts in a 5. And thank you very much for that support, by the way. They said, any updates on Venezuela? It's my birthday tonight. And also happy birthday to you, by the way. He said, go LSA, and you guys are great at it.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support, and a big happy birthday to you. And I hope you've been having a great one. And I gotta thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because it is folks like you that help to make this thing possible and help us to keep this thing on air. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
He asked a question right there. He said, any updates on Venezuela?
Oh yeah, they deploy 15,000 troops to their border regions around the Lake of Maracaibo, and also there are some additional U.S. warships that are being considered to be sent into the Caribbean. And so with that, I hope that does answer your question well, and a big thanks to you once again for support and help with this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one is going to go to Andrew Honeycutt. And Andrew put in a 10 once again. He said, I work with 3 professors, 2 from Ukraine and 1 from Russia, all over 60, and migrated to the U.S. And through many in-depth convos, they say that Russia's citizens are brainwashed and they have no choice. And I would agree with them. They are essentially brainwashed because of the way the Putin regime operates, where he offs anybody that disagrees with him. There is no freedom of speech. There is no freedom of protest or expression in Russia. If you do that, you'll find out the hard way that that doesn't work. So essentially, it is a dictatorship. There is no democracy in Russia, and anything to the contrary of that is simply propaganda. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to agree. They're absolutely flat out brainwashed. A lot of countries like that are, like China, like Zhangwa Di. They go around saying that all day. But beyond that, they're fairly brainwashed, and generally I would never visit those countries due to how tyrannical their governments are. They are brainwashed to the greatest extent. Any sort of a stepping out of line, any sort of dissent is met with an iron fist is the best way to say it. So a big thanks to you once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And also, I saw Andrew Honeycutt ask a question in extension to a super chat. He said, has the British Empire not profited from war? Has the U.S. not profited from war either? To some extent, yes. But to others, no. Did the British profit off of the Opium War? Yes. But that was because that war opened up trade. The Chinese were really weak. So it was an open and shut war. They won it very quickly with practically no losses on their side or any exorbitant cost. So then they were able to open up trade in terms of the opium trade with the Chinese and make it a nationwide thing. So that war was opening up a new market for a lucrative kind of trade that they had and opened up a sphere of influence within the area. That was profitable to some extent. But World War II was certainly not profitable for Britain, because if it was profitable for Britain, they would have given up none of their colonial possessions around the world. And if World War I was profitable, they wouldn't have started to consider giving up all their colonial concessions, because if you ever look at the history of the United Kingdom in the 20th century, they entered that century the most powerful country on the planet. World War I came and went, and after World War I, they started to get really tight on the government funds, and they started to go, you know, these colonial holdings, they're a little bit expensive to maintain. And they're so, like, the cost of World War I was so much, they're like, maybe we need to start getting rid of a lot of our colonial holdings. And then that's when they first started talking about getting rid of the British Raj and also all of their holdings in Africa. Then after World War II, they were so broke, they were like, damn, we can't even afford to maintain any of these colonies. We need to start getting rid of them. Because you'll notice that most British colonies only started to be shed off after World War II, and that's because that war was so expensive and all-consuming for the British, they had no money to maintain colonial holdings. And a lot of people always talk about, oh, we, like the truth, like, this is the kind of, like, the ironic thing. Like, the Indians will talk about, oh, you know, Gandhi, he got the British colonizers out of here. Not really. The British were already out of money. Gandhi starving himself in public was only even more credence for them to get out quickly, because they were hemorrhaging money, controlling India. Like, that's really the truth of it. If you ever look at how that went at the time, it was really more so that Britain just couldn't even afford it. And so that's really the thing that I'd have to say about that, because America profited off of some wars, not really a lot of them. Like the war in 1812, and that was like definitely not beneficial for America. The American Revolutionary War was a war of independence, so it doesn't really count too much because it was more so a rebel force than anything. And the Revolutionary War also hit the British in their financial pocket even more so than the French and Indian War. On top of that, that's an even greater example in itself. The French and Indian War, or the 7-Year War as it's called in Europe, was so financially exhaustive for the British that they had to impose taxes on the colonies, which led to the Revolutionary War. That's how expensive war was for them, that they had to raise new taxes on the U.S. colonies when the U.S. Colonies had never had taxes imposed on them before. Then the French financially supporting the American Revolution was so exorbitantly expensive for them, also with their direct armed involvement in the conflict as well, that sort of a lack of funds was what led to the despotic economic conditions in France, which led to the French Revolution. So it's not always the case that wars are profitable and wars are great. A lot of wars end up taking people out to the cleaners, really, even the people who end up winning them, like the French or the British. The example, Revolutionary War and also the French Revolution. But with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. But a great question, Andrew Honeycutt, and that'll be my counter argument to it. But with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so our next one here goes to the Stinger Jr. 1. He puts in a 5 and says, what are your thoughts on Australia expelling the Iranian ambassadors?
I think it was well deserved. The Iranians, I wouldn't even consider them to be a legitimate country. They're practically a terrorist regime that controls a spot of land in the Middle East, and I would say that was well deserved. And so with that, a big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to Jason Carney, who puts in a 5. And Jason said, what's in the fridge? And for the sandwich fund. Honestly, the fridge is real bare these days. The cupboards are bare, as they say. But honestly, though, I think pretty much the main thing got in the fridge at this point is bottled water, a little bit of Pedialyte, and also a week's worth of HelloFresh. Not sponsored, by the way, but I would love them to sponsor us one day if they would like to, but I have a feeling they probably won't because of the content we do here on the channel, but we would love to have them, but very good stuff. And also, I think we have some cold brew in there, and that might be about it at this point. The freezer has some Jimmy Dean breakfast sandwiches in it. Outside of that, though, it's pretty much bare in there, too. So not too much in there. But what's that you Enforcer?
We have some Pringles in the pantry, and I think that's all that's left in the pantry at this point. Not really a lot. But still, I hope that does address it the best we can, Jason Carney. And thank you for what I hope is the sandwich fund. We really need some. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Miki Subzuni, who puts in a 5. And thank you very much, good sir, for that support. And he did not leave a comment, but we do appreciate that very much. And we're glad to see you supporting the channel. We do appreciate that. We also had a 5 from Andrew Honeycutt yet again, who said, let the flamingos fly. Ukraine and Russia have already conducted deep strike attacks against each other's capitals, etc. Elephant in the room syndrome.
And I would agree. I think that the flamingos should be allowed unlimited reign over Russian airspace to hit any target. And so with that, a big thanks to you once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have one from Wolf Packer. What's in
what the hell?
I don't think I recognize what that said until I just read that off, but thank you very much, Wolf, for support. They said, lifelong Utah resident and professional street artist here, and Utah has a very small gang problem and LSA. And I would say very small, very, very small, by the way. I didn't see personally any gang presence there when I was driving around the whole place. So I do agree with you. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say that's good to know. I thank you very much for the support, Wolf, and helping this channel to keep on running. And also, really quickly, I got to address this one again. Tyrone Biggs said, tell Raytheon and Lockheed that wars aren't profitable. They aren't. Like, they are profitable.
Well, for those companies, they're profitable.
For those companies, they're profitable. But for the nation as a whole, it's not. Well,
he's saying the company. He's saying the companies are profiting. He's not saying the country. He's saying Raytheon and Lockheed are profiting, which they are. I mean, if they make more weaponry, they're obviously making profits.
Yeah, but my argument's been like, and I think this is where a lot of people are seeing a disconnect. My argument is that for a nation, a war is not profitable. Wars are destructive even for the winning party because they generally spend about every dime they have fighting one. It might be profitable for a military industry or a war industry, but that does not mean that it's profitable or beneficial for the nation at large. And that's what a lot of people don't really like, where a lot of people see a disconnect. Sure, a company like Raytheon could make some money in a war, but the government has just put, in that war, trillions of dollars into weapon systems that do not return any sort of an investment into their nation itself. Like, the government could have put those trillions of dollars into road infrastructure projects, or given out loans to businesses that could generate a greater tax base. None of that money was used in that way to return an investment. All of it was literally thrown into a pit. That's what happens in a war. Most of the money that's spent is thrown into a supply pit that we never see anything come back from. You can't use a bomb to end up making any kind of money. It's just out of the question. It's a dead-end sort of product.
But if the country takes a majority share of that defense company because they decide to start basically nationalizing private companies in America, then I guess they would have a profit incentive at that point, because if you have a 10% share, and let's say, for example, just picking one, not trying to pick on them or anything like that, but let's say Lockheed, you take a 10% stake of that and you give that to the United States government. Now all of a sudden, the United States has a profit incentive to actually start wars because now they have a stake in the company.
That's pretty damn socialist. Like that is.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like nationalization. It sounds like socialism. I mean, I mean, that's not my opinion. That's the definition of it. So, you know, I'm not trying to be political with that. That's just the reality of it. I mean, facts can be political. I mean, I'm just stating the facts.
I'm pretty sure that when Clement Attlee did that in the United Kingdom, he was a member of the Labour Party, which is usually considered to be pretty damn socialist, like just off of their policy. So I'd say that that's probably not really an American kind of a thing to do, or not really fitting under the whole capitalist sort of a economic structure. I mean, the British can do what they want. I'm not saying that the Labour Party is good or bad, but here in America, that doesn't really seem to fly all too much, especially from people who are saying that they're all for capitalism. But, you know, potato, you know, if you say something like that, you might get arrested these days, so who knows. But
and also typically that has never been done, because the only time any company or any private institution in America has been bailed out or nationalized or taken a share of and given to the U.S. government is back during the financial crisis of 2008. But that was only under emergency circumstances. If you do that across the board in a non-emergency circumstance, there's no real reason to do it, and you're just doing it just to take the percentage and give it to the government, then that is by definition socialism, because the state owning a majority share of businesses that are private companies, that creates a huge conflict of interest, because the government is in charge of regulating that private company, but if they take a share in it, then they have a profit incentive to make sure that company does the best as possible. So then they're in between, do we regulate the company or do we maximize profit return on it? Because the government's going to get some of the profits. I mean, I can't even believe we're having that talk, to be honest with you. That seems ridiculous. It's mind-blowing to me. I don't even have anything else to say about it.
Well, I actually have someone here in the chat, Matthew, that blew my mind a little bit more. They said, not that different from taxing the industry. So, Matthew, I'm going to let you take that one over and explain why that's very different than just taxing that specific industry or company.
Well, I mean, if you tax a company, like, for example, if you're taxing their business, like their income tax or corporate taxes or whatever that is, that's one thing. But the government doesn't have a say in that company. They have no decision-making power, and there's no conflict of interest, because all they're getting is taxes. Every company pays taxes. But if they have a controlling share, let's say 10% is a controlling share of a company, just take a hypothetical company, for instance, now the government has a say in how that business operates, which is what China does, people. That's literally what China does, which is our enemy. And we literally bash them all the time, talking about they're commies, they're socialists, they're this, that, and another. And we fight against it because we're trying to keep our capitalist system. So why would we let the government take a stake in a private company? I mean, this is honestly, it's frustrating to even have to go into this, because this isn't even an argument. Like, we've known this for decades. Like, this is not something new. This is basics, folks. This is very basic.
I got to be honest with y'all, folks. I don't even know why the hell this kind of shit is even being an argument at this point, because it seems like nowadays, if you're leaning right or left, or if you end up being a Republican or Democrat, common sense and just basic level knowledge, like room temperature knowledge, goes out of the window. Like, that's clearly socialist. What's going on right now is the nationalization of major companies. That is a socialist economic action. It's literally the definition: nationalization of large, significant industries and heavy industry. That is literally the definition of a socialist economic structure. Without a shadow of a doubt, you can literally go and see, like, Clement Attlee's socialist government in the Labour Party in the UK in the 50s, right after World War II, nationalized everything. It's considered a socialist action. So when you say something like this, and you go, oh, it's just pure capitalist, it's like, are people this stupid to believe something like that? That is the most socialist kind of action that you can take. Like, it is. Like, there's nothing more socialist than that, is the nationalization of a company and having the government have a majority share or stake in that company, and the say how it operates.
And also, it's not a bailout, by the way. I see a couple of people saying that. This is not a bailout that we're talking about here. This is purely taking a controlling share of a private company, that's not bailing them out. But if there's no economic crisis that the company is facing, it by nature it can't be a bailout. There's nothing to bail them out of because they're functioning, they're making profits, and they're a healthy company on the balance sheet. So you can't bail out a healthy company. But what that is nationalization. If it's a healthy company that the government's taking a majority share of, or even a large stake in, that is by nature socialism. Like that's not democratic. That's not capitalism. That's the complete opposite.
And I see some people saying it's a bailout. It's not a bailout. This company was not defaulting. This company was not failing. Intel stocks were successful. Let me go show them. Intel was a growing company in stocks. It makes no sense to say that they were failing. If they were failing, their stock prices would reflect that. Their stock prices are not reflecting that. So that doesn't really make a lot of sense to say, it's a bailout. And also a government, when it bails out a company, doesn't get shares in that company. They just bail them out for the good of the economy. The government, also, folks, I got to say this as well. With the government having a 10% share in that company, that means that they get 10% of the dividends, 10% of the profits off of that company. They also have the majority share in that company now, meaning that they are the ones who get to have the say in how the company functions. So,
well, that part's debatable. I'm not sure what a majority stake in Intel would actually be, and in reality, we'd have to see exactly what that is. I haven't examined that very closely. Somebody can maybe tell us that if they know how Intel's structures oriented, who is the majority stakeholder of Intel. I'm not sure if 10% would be a majority stake. We'd have to figure that out. But at the same time, though, we're told that the reason why the 10% stake was given to the United States government is because it was supposed to be a way to increase government influence over semiconductor production, because that's a huge national concern. And also it's a way to gain a financial return on the investment. And I think the theory was the money that's made as a return is going to go to the sovereign wealth fund. And that's the theory, I think. But nobody's really sure what that really means. It's just kind of like word soup at this point. Nobody's really sure what that really means in reality. And basically it's just wait and find out. That's essentially the way I'm taking it.
Yeah, I mean, if the government didn't like Intel for some reason, or thought they were doing rough, they could have busted them up in an antitrust, although it's hard to even say if Intel was a monopoly at this point because Nvidia's kind of beating their ass. So you could have done that. You could have done anything but this is literally socialist. Some people might get their minds blown from that, but that's literally the definition of socialism: is nationalization of large companies. Let me go type that in for everyone who might be a little bit confused. Is nationalization, nationalization of companies socialist? Let's just ask that question in its most simplest form. Let's see. This is the AI overview, just to get the quick answer. Nationalization can be a tool used within the socialist system to transition to socialism, but isn't socialist in itself, as state ownership can exist for other reasons. But still, this is generally considered to be a socialist move. Clement Attlee in Britain was probably the most famous person here in the West that ever did that, and that was back in the day when the Labour Party was considered to be hardcore socialist. That was their thing, the red flag and all. So, a little bit of a... it's not really a move that I'm a big fan of. Honestly,
It's the biggest, and once again, you can't really use the term bailout because that's not what this is, but it's one of the biggest government interventions in a private company since the auto bailout of 2008. That's how large this is as a concept. So it's not like some minor move or something. We're talking about $10 billion here, and we're also talking about 10% stake in a major U.S. company, which is basically the preeminent semiconductor manufacturer and also a computer company in the entire country. So it's not small whatsoever. And I'm really not clear about why the rationale was that the government needed to take the 10% stake in it. I'm really not sure even why that was the case. We're told, some reasons, but that doesn't even sound like logical to me why the reasons were. But it is what it is. They've done it, so we'll have to find out where it goes because apparently it's going to get approved.
Yeah, it's rough. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here is going to go to Mind Freak, who puts in a 10 New Zealand. And thank you very much, Mind Freak, for that support. They said, I've dropped a random pin on Google Street View and landed on Yenotayevskaya in Volgograd. And it looks like it hasn't much changed since World War II.
Yenotayevskaya Ulica. Let's take a look. Holy moly.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Man,
Uh,
I heard the Russians out here are singing "We Need Only One Victory" still. Like, honestly, oh my God. Oh my God. This is Volgograd. Volgograd, which is the seat of the Volgograd Oblast. Holy hell. This is rough.
oh, look, a modern one.
Oh, look, he's posing. Like, he's posing. Look, there's his
Hey, look,
car.
it's his car. Right there, look at that. He's gonna rev that bad boy up. He's like,
oh my God, that is rough. Where is this? Oh, this is like right near downtown Volgograd. Right there. Like, it's like 5 blocks away. Oh my God. Let's go take another look at this street further down. Oh my God. This is apocalyptic.
This is Volgograd.
Man, let's see. I want to make sure to get the full view, this full screen. Oh my God.
Oh, red fence. Oh.
Oh. they're still in the Great Patriotic War down here in this place. Jeez. I've never seen it. Let's go to another street. Oh my God, it goes on forever.
Oh my God.
Oh my God. Whoa. Look at that. Oh, what the hell is this? A wood chipper?
Maybe.
This place scares me. Like this
That's the body snatcher.
Bro, that's where the FSB puts the bodies. Oh, look, it's a heating pipe that's been busted open.
Ah, yes. Nothing like scalding hot water in the morning.
Good morning, Volga. Like, it's just on fire. Oh, look, it's the train that you can take to and from work. That's depressing. Oh, it really is, actually. That's actually a station that's used. Oh, my God. So they go to work on this thing. Holy, what does it look like in the Khrushchevskaya, the Khrushchevskas and shit? What does it look like down here? Oh my God. This is bad. Like, it's just that the buildings are slightly taller. This is a terrible
very
place.
commie.
Yes, it's like they have not left the Soviet Union here. Oh, look, that is a forgot his name. Brezhnevka. That's a Brezhnevka right there. Damn, bro. This place is rough. My God, this place looks like Donetsk after it went through a war, and it's not even in a war. And then they have this giant wavy building right here. They said we have to make a cool one. It doesn't really look that cool.
No, it doesn't look that cool to me. I'm not liking it.
I gotta tell y'all, folks, this place is rough as hell. Thank you for the support and sharing that with us, but Volgograd is hell. I think that's where people go to die is Volgograd. But with that, a big thanks to you for the support. I hope that has addressed that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Backyard Brawl Brothers, and he puts in a 5. And thank you very much, good sir, for that support. And nothing like backyard brawling with brothers, am I right? But he said you didn't mention we can't talk conspiracy theories. And what is one you can both get behind if you had to pick? Now, out of all the conspiracy theories out there, there's some crazy ones out there. I'm not going to lie. There's some crazy stuff out there that people get like all like whacked out thinking about. But one that is closer to reality that I could sort of get behind is the idea that mainstream media is controlled to a certain extent by the government. I can get behind that one somewhat because it's not too far from reality. Because back in the day, there was a CIA project where they literally had journalists in their back pocket. And they also funded them a little bit as well. So it happens. And technically, I'm not sure if that project ever came to an end. Not really sure if it came to an end. Maybe it did, maybe it didn't. Nobody's really sure. But I would say that's a valid point. Now, here's the catch, though, with that. Just because the CIA is working with certain journalists doesn't mean they have the whole news outfit under their thumb. That does not mean that. A lot of people believe that maybe, oh, look, if X, Y, and Z news agency says this, they must have the whole thing taken over by the government. That doesn't mean that. They might just have 1 or 2 journalists at that organization under their thumb or under their influence, and that's all they need to control the narrative coming out of that station, as long as they have strategic people in the right spot. So that's one I can get behind somewhat. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to agree. That's one I could get behind. Most conspiracy theories, though, are absolutely like insane. Like they're not even founded in reality. But I do thank you for the support. I hope that has addressed that well. And we are on to the next one.
And we have a 5 from the Burninator, and he puts in a 5. And he said, can you guys please talk about why this is significant financial turmoil isn't being covered in our mainstream media? It seems like this should be relevant in things.
They talk down to their viewers, and they think that they're stupid, so they don't really include a lot to them. If you go to CNN, it's it's the Republicans are the bad guys. You go to Fox, it's the Democrats who are the bad guys. Like they both call themselves like terrorist groups and stuff these days. So that's really why you don't hear about it. They're too busy trying to keep their ratings up with the insane political people these days to really care too much about real news. So that's also why one day they're going to end up going the way of the dodo, because people actually want real news like all of y'all. That's why y'all are here. So a big thanks to you so much for the support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 5 from NK Production, and they said, "Hi friends, Kim here. And do you guys understand why, or excuse me, do you guys understand any of the Eastern European languages? Also, what would happen if Russia turns into a North Korea-like state?"
Russia would just pretty much shrivel up economically, like practically cease to exist at that point. And also, I don't really know any really Eastern European languages. Like I can pick up a little bit of Russian and Ukrainian here and there, but not to a proficient degree. So with that, I hope that does address that well. And thank you once again for support, NK Productions, and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Hen CCA, who puts in a 3. He said, "Hello, everyone, and I hope that addresses it well."
Hey, you know the lines. I gotta thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. Also, by the way, there's some drama stirring up right now between Denmark and the United States, by the way. Denmark's not happy with us in the United States. Denmark's foreign minister right now is summoning the U.S. top embassy diplomat in Copenhagen over reports that U.S. citizens are conducting influence campaigns in Greenland. Oh, boy. I think I know some of the people that might be conducting influence campaigns. I think they were on the news media a while back. They were actually showing videos and pictures of them going there and talking to the people there. I think that might be the people that the Denmark folks are referring to, but we'll have to find out. But jumping into our next super chat, this one goes to Scott Binkley, and Scott put in a 3. He said, "When will Ukraine smite Yamal LNG plant?"
I would not know exactly at the moment, Scott Binkley. That's up to them, and unfortunately, we just would not know. But a big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Plazoth, who puts in a 3. And thank you very much, Plazoth, as well, for that support. We do appreciate that, as always. We also have a 2 from LSA Sergeant Figment, who said, "LSA, hit the like button. That's an order."
Hey, and hit the like button. That is an order. And a big thanks to you once again, LSA Sergeant Figment, for always telling people to hit the like button. We're massively appreciative of it. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Backyard Brawl Brothers, who puts in a 2. He said, "What are your thoughts on the flag burning change?" I will say this for my part real quick. I'm just going to adhere to the law. The law is established. And I'm going to make this disclaimer up front. If you burn an American flag, you're definitely not going to have my favor. I can tell you that right now. I don't look very kindly on that whatsoever. The flag represents the people of this country, not the government of this country. So when you burn a flag, in my mind, you're burning the memories of all of our great soldiers that have sacrificed their life over the many hundreds of years this country's been around to get where we are today. So I view it as extremely disrespectful. I think it's a terrible thing, just to make that clear. I don't really support that whatsoever. But at the same time, though, the Supreme Court says you have the right to do that under freedom of expression. And I believe in upholding the law, because that's what the people fought for and died for in the military, was because they were trying to make sure our freedoms were ensured. That's what they fought and died for. They didn't fight and die for some people that are in charge of our country. They fought and died for our rights. So, and the U.S. Constitution. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that it is a First Amendment protected right of freedom of expression to be able to burn an American flag. That was decided by the Supreme Court a while ago, because back in the day, it wasn't really on the books whether or not that was actually a crime. The Supreme Court ruled that it is not a crime. It is a freedom of expression. While I would also say that as a patriot of the United States, I do not like the idea of people burning an American flag, and I'd have to say that I'm generally against people doing that. That does not mean that that should be illegal, and people should be put into the slammer for decades for burning a flag, because at the end of the day, while symbolically it holds a lot of value, we also have to remember that it is just a piece of wool, cotton, or nylon that has the pattern of our nation's banner on it. That's it. Like, what are we going to start doing? We're going to start treating posters of the face of the president like the political posters in North Korea of Kim Jong-un, where if you even touch them or just slightly tilt them where they're not perfectly straight and level, that's defacing the face of our great leader, and you go to prison for 20 years for that. Is it going to get to that? That's generally why we have those sorts of laws in the book, because while it's extremely offensive, freedom of expression and freedom of speech doesn't mean that you have the freedom to say things that are non-offensive or something along those lines. You have the right to say things that are non-offending and offensive under the freedom of expression. You have that right. That's why the extremist groups from both sides are generally allowed to exist and say their crazy stuff in this country, is because they have the freedom to say crazy, offensive things. That's just a part of it. That's something I think people don't get. And I'd also have to say that that's a little bit goofy, because if I remember correctly, this was supposed to be, if I remember their own terminology correctly, the Free Speech Party is at least how they marketed themselves in the last election, and now they're starting to make open laws restricting freedom of expression and freedom of speech, which I find to be a little bit, what would we call that, Matthew? Hypocritical? Because if you're for freedom of speech, that means all speech, including speech that is considered to be offensive, not just the speech that you agree with. So with that,
Yeah, that's not free if it's only one you agree with. Also, Crispy said most people were taught don't ever let the flag touch the grass. That's what we were taught, because I was in high school. I was in JRTC the entire time I was there, and I was on flag duty multiple different times. And then most people are going to be like, oh, JRTC. But the point is, though, we learned about the flag protocol and how to fold the flag, how you address the flag, how you do the flag, fold it, store it, etc. You don't ever let it touch the ground. If you let that thing touch the ground, you're about to be in for a hellish time. Especially if you're doing that, you're about to be in for a hellish time, very hellish time, actually. So you don't do that. That's disrespectful, and especially burning it. Burning it's like you don't get any worse than that. That's like the ultimate thing you could possibly do to go wrong, doing something like that. But still, though, it is your right, freedom of expression. It is your right. But I don't think many people are going to look at that very kindly, even though it is your right. But at the same time, though, should you imprison somebody for burning the flag since they have the right of freedom of expression? I think common sense says no, but these days doesn't seem to be all that popular. I'm not sure, but anyways, jumping on to
here's the Supreme Court case for people who may be a little bit confused, because I see some people who are confused in chat. It's illegal! So let me go and get the Supreme Court case for y'all. This is the highest court in the land under the U.S. Constitution, Section 3, actually, it's the entire Article 3 and all sections of Article 3 that lays out that the Supreme Court is the Supreme Court of the land, and that gets to make decisions on what is constitutional and unconstitutional, what's legal and illegal. Texas v. Johnson in 1989 is a landmark decision by the Supreme Court of the United States, in which the court held a 5-4 opinion that burning the flag of the United States was protected speech under the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, as doing so counts as symbolic speech and political speech. So, you do have a protected right to burn a flag in the United States of America. It's not really going to win you a lot of friends, and it's definitely going to win you the ire of the public. But at the same time, you have a right to be able to do that. Whether you think or not, I don't give a damn. This is the law, and that's the actual law of the land. The Supreme Court of America, or the Supreme Court of the United States decision cannot be overturned by a presidential executive order. That does not exist in the balance of powers. Technically, according to the law, which the Supreme Court has already made quite clear, and if the current executive order was challenged in the court, it most likely would be shot down. The Supreme Court, the most supreme court in America, has already deemed that this is freedom of speech. Not that I'd ever burn an American flag, but you technically have the illegal right to do so if you want to. So with that, hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. Well, it's not even my opinion, that's the damn law. So anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to LC39A once again. He throws in yet a third super chat of the night, a massive one, by the way, and a huge shout out to you, good sir, for that third massive support. It's crazy support right there. Thank you very much. And LC39, I'll be honest with you, LC39A, I don't even really know how to thank you at this point. I'll be honest with you. This is such massive support. I get confused about how even to express it, but to be honest with you. But thank you very much, seriously speaking, for that support. He said, Russia cries nukes because it has little to lose. And the more you go east of Russia, the more it looks like it has already been nuked, LOL.
Yeah, honestly, it does. It looks like hell out there. And honestly, I think that's why they cry nuclear weapons, because if a nuclear weapon hit Volgograd, it's not really going to change much of its appearance. It looks the same before and after. So I gotta say, thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible and keep it running. And I gotta say that's got a lot of truth in it. So a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And a big thanks to you once again, LC39A, for helping this channel to keep on running. Also, another question really quickly, folks. I gotta ask you all this, because some people are saying, oh, you still can't burn an American flag. So let me ask you this. So what about all those bastardizations of the American flag that are out there, where people put the "Don't Tread on Me" snake on it, which isn't the official American flag, or the back the blue American flag, or the back the red American flag. Those are not actual legally represented American flags. So are those crimes to produce now? Because apparently now we have some sort of a legal definition of a specific protected item that cannot be burned. So now we have to discern which it is defacing the flag by making anything rather than the official U.S. flag. Is that also a crime now by extension? Or if you burn one of those, is that a crime? Because technically it's not the official U.S. flag. It's some sort of a bastardization of it for some sort of a ideological or political cause. So does that also fall under the law that you can't burn those flags? Or are those considered not an official U.S. flag? And then at that point, what flags are U.S. flags and what flags aren't? There's a lot of questions, honestly, here to this law because it's quite ambiguous. Like, if a flag just has the design of the U.S. flag on it, like a back the blue flag, like this one. So is that technically a U.S. flag? So if you burn that one, is that also a crime? Although it's not a official U.S. flag of the United States of America, it has the pattern of the U.S. flag on it. So now do we extend that to also be under the protection of the flag burning executive order that's been put out now? What is that under? Or any of the other versions of this? Like, who knows? Like, it's a little bit ambiguous.
I said, adhere to the law. The law is the precedent set by the U.S. Supreme Court, and that can't just be overturned at whim, or otherwise that nullifies the entire Supreme Court. So, it's straightforward on that one.
Yeah, it's a fairly straightforward thing. And also, folks, here's how it's going to go. That executive, I've just got to be honest with y'all, that executive order is bogus. So what's going to happen is that someone somewhere is going to get arrested for doing that. Then they're going to go to court. And it's going to cost loads of money and stuff. But then that court, the lawyer, if they're smart, is going to go, Texas v. Johnson in 1989, decided by the Supreme Court, already laid out this is free speech. And then the court's going to go, oh, yeah, you're right. And they're going to throw the whole case out, and that executive order doesn't mean a damn thing. It's like, it may as well not even be worth the paper it was written on, because that doesn't even, that isn't even in the merit of the law. The president also doesn't have the executive ability to write an executive order to go that something is now a crime. That has to be done through the Congress. And then the Supreme Court is the one who would decide afterwards whether that's even constitutional or not. The president has no authority under the Constitution anywhere to be able to write an executive order to codify something as a crime. It just doesn't exist. So that it's ridiculous on its face. The concept of it's ridiculous. It's an affront to the Supreme Court ruling, and it's going to get thrown out anyways. The whole thing is stupid from top to bottom.
And also, by the way, folks, another thing as well that I really honestly don't see too many people arguing against it, but just to clarify one more time, the executive branch is not omnipotent in this country. There's checks and balances. There's a separation of powers. Those things are enshrined in the U.S. Constitution. That's not something that's an opinion. That's literally written in law. Each branch checks the other one. Like, for example, the Supreme Court can determine the legal validity of executive orders. And if it's determined to be not legal, then that executive order is not enforceable. That's the way it works. There is no such thing as a king's decree in this country. There will never be unless the Constitution is thrown out completely. So, I don't understand how anybody out there can argue that there's a free pass to do whatever the hell the president wants. There is no such thing as that. He's subject to the same judicial review that everybody else in this country is subject to, and there's no exceptions to that. So I'm totally in favor of the president exercising his rights underneath the Constitution or under the Constitution. Perfectly fine. I think everybody's agreeable to that. I'm not sure who isn't. But you can't just go do whatever you want. Now, like, that statement in itself is crazy. To even suggest that the president can do whatever they want, they cannot. They're subject to review.
Also, I saw someone say, I think the president just did that to be symbolic. You don't sign executive orders to be symbolic. And also, you don't say that the president can do wherever the hell he wants. And I think America kind of wants a dictator, just to say whatever you want. Like, some people are getting blinded by he's just trolling. You don't troll as the president, and you don't say statements like that, because those are incredibly dangerous kinds of statements to make. From the basic premise of them, it's as the elected representative at the head of the executive branch, you are pretty much questioning the entire U.S. Constitution and throwing the whole thing on its head to, and I quote, troll people. That doesn't really make a lot of sense. That would be like me becoming president saying, you know what? I think we're going to take all these people and start conducting crimes against them. You don't say that to joke with people because you're the president of the United States, and a lot of people are going to go, he's the president of the United States, so if he says that, he might actually have the ability to do something little bit stupid. So you generally don't say that sort of a thing in that sort of an extent. You say that with an intent behind it, or there's an assumed intent because of the position and power that you hold as the head of the executive branch. So I hope that does kind of address those bits, because I kind of get tired of people giving a lot of leeway to things that are constitutionally questionable to the prior president and the former one to go, well, I think it's only in the best interest. No, like, if it's against the Constitution, it's not in the best interest of anything, and the statement should have never been made in the first place. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Andrew Honeycutt once again. He puts in a 5 and said, I grew up in a time without social media, and it seems like an ingenious system of control. And is it not what totalitarian regimes want? Passive management. The social media is a private enterprise, so it's not controlled by the government necessarily. The government may try to interfere with it, but it's technically private. So I would say, generally speaking, under the current system, I really couldn't call it a system of control. If people voluntarily allow themselves to be controlled by it, that's the individual person's problem, in my opinion. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that, in my opinion, it's more of a private company thing. I'd have to agree with Matthew on that. It's a little bit more nuanced than that at its face, really. But still, I do thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. Also, by the way, just to address this really quickly, someone in the chat saying that the president has authorities under emergency declarations. That is true, he does. That's written down in the law as well. But the problem is there's no emergency declaration right now. So you can't pass an executive order which goes contrary to a Supreme Court precedent that's already been decided. That's an unlawful order, is what that is. It's not enforceable. So if you try to, for example, the federal government decides to arrest somebody for burning a U.S. flag and tries to adhere to the executive order, that runs contrary to the U.S. Supreme Court precedent. So at that point, you're basically saying this. You're basically saying, throw the Supreme Court out, the judicial branch, screw the Supreme Court. We don't care what they have to say. The executive branch is all-knowing, all-powerful. Screw the branches. They'll do what they want. At that point, you just turn the country into a dictatorship. I'm going to say that as plainly as it is. You've turned the country into a dictatorship at that point. The Supreme Court has to be honored. Their precedent has to be honored. If you don't honor their precedent and you say, oh, there's an exception here or there, you're basically throwing out the entire separation of powers, which goes contrary to the entire U.S. Constitution, which is the foundation of our entire government. So it's pretty straightforward to me on that one. But anyways, jumping into our next one, this one goes to Chris Webb, and he said, Slava Ukraine.
And Slava Ukraini, Herom Slava. And a big thanks to you for the support, Chris Webb, and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, it's time for us to move on into the live chat questions. And due to time constraints, we're going to be getting the Morse code decoders of the night and 3 live chat questions, and then rounding out the stream. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so jumping into our live chat questions, this one, actually our Morse code decoders first. This one goes to Paul Schultz, Kevin J, Mason Miami, Joni Dog, Norm Pritchett, Arabo Garbo, Heroic Fluffiness Kush, and Copioteryx and Sire. And they said, the Morse says, Russia is losing all of its farming industry, and with it, about all else in LLT LSA.
And that is the sound of money, and y'all got that dead on the nail. That was the Morse code message of the night. I got to congratulate y'all greatly for getting that correct time and time again, because if it wasn't for all of y'all folks out there in the Morse code decoders of the Least Springer Signal Corps, we wouldn't be able to hear what that message was each and every single night. So a massive thanks to all of y'all so much once again. And with that, we are on to the third to last question of the night.
And this one is going to go to, I'm trying to pick through the good ones here. Let's see here. Oh, there's so many good ones. This one goes to Activista, who said, I wonder how the fuel shortage in the East is affecting North Korea.
I wonder how it's affecting the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. Honestly, they work on a fuel starvation diet, kind of like their population does with food. So it probably doesn't affect them too much because their fuel consumption is already slim to none, even before the war. So they're probably just going back to what they did beforehand, if anything. So probably not affecting them all too much. But I hope that does address it the best I can. And with that, we are on to the second to last question of the night.
And this one is going to go to Avari Mendebratis. He said, are Iranian ports used to supply Russia with arms within the range of Ukraine's new weapons? And how likely might we see attacks against Iran by Ukraine?
That is a good question. Let's see. Technically, Iranian ports in the Caspian Sea are used to supply the Russians, ports like Chalice and such, but those are a little bit harder to attack because they're fairly significant ways away from Ukraine. Say if they wanted to launch them from the Dnipropetrovsk Oblast, that's about a 1,100-mile flight, so that would be stretching the ability of Ukraine's drone forces, but a Flamingo could hit it. So technically those could be warlike targets, but generally the Ukrainians relegate themselves to only striking targets inside the Russian Federation due to the concern that conducting such an action against a country like Iran could directly draw them into the conflict and help bolster Russia's manpower and also military equipment abilities. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who was the lucky last person to throw in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is going to be Alan, who said, let me get this straight. Is Russia basically trading an agricultural collapse for a bank collapse?
Pretty much, yeah. Like that's kind of how it's working at this point. Both of them are equally indispensable to a modern country, so they're pretty much just saying we'll eat for now and let the banks collapse. We'll eat later and let the banks collapse right now. That's kind of what they're shooting for, but they'll end up getting neither at this rate. So I hope that does address that well. And with that, folks, we have reached the end of tonight's stream. I got to thank you all so much once again for watching. It's been an absolute honor and a pleasure to be able to run the stream for all of y'all. And we've got to thank y'all massively for watching this stream and enjoying it tonight once again. If y'all have enjoyed, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and support us on Patreon if you would like to. You don't have to, but you can. I don't even know if the link is in the description below. I don't know. I'm just kind of saying that because for some reason I'm getting rehearsed to say that these days. But nevertheless, we will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of the news from around the world. And if there is enough news in the middle of the day, Matthew will be the one making the short war summary. And so with that, we will see you all then. Good night. Good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, long live the East Spring Army, and long live the Republic.
And with that, folks, we will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern on our next nightly war news stream, and midday tomorrow as well for a short war video if there is enough news to cover, and we're not really sure if there will be. The news looks like it might have gotten a little dried up today, but we'll have to see tomorrow if that's the case. But if there is one, you'll see us midday, and if not, you'll see us on a stream that night. But nonetheless, thank you all to the 102,000 people that joined us by the very end of the stream, and we will see you all tomorrow. And of course, Slava Ukraine, Heroem Slava, get some rest, and good night.
One.